Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D in WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku became the Grim Reaper. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Souls, the echoes and moans of the lost souls that he had cut down during his time here. Good or evil, it didn't matter which side they were on. Only that they were another person for him to kill because it was his job as the Grim Reaper. Izuku Midoriya was his name, a formerly quirkless boy who was always looked down by society and had a hard time growing up. He was kidnapped at the age 10 when he was left alone in the hospital room, a few years after he was determined quirkless. He was a late bloomer, very late bloomer. He gained his quirk during his time in captivity, but it could have been dormant this entire time. Before finding out about his quirk status, he would have dreams of seeing dead people walking around or where he witnesses the death of the next person that is going to die. He didn't know what it was, but it always terrified him. He was always screaming in his sleep. It was bad. It was so bad to the point that his mother and co had to sleep with him to make him feel safe. But the truth was ... and no matter what he did, he would always see them day in and day out as if it was one of his daily habits. Then let's add on to the bullying he had to endure. When he was told he was quirkless, he instantly shut down. He didn't hear his mom or the doctor in that room anymore. All he heard was that he couldn't be a hero. He didn't scream, he didn't whine or anything. He just sat there still as if he was frozen in time. His mother and co blamed herself for not giving him a quirk and that he was going into a life of a quirkless human. Bullied, shunned, non-existent. All of that pained her too much. But instead of reacting to it and breaking down, he just sighed and accepted his fate. He never thought that he would be one of the 20% humans that were quirkless. But hey, life not's fair. He was more worried about his mother and how she took all of this. He didn't blame her for not giving a quirk. He didn't blame her for anything at all. His father, on the other hand, walked out on them. He wanted nothing to do with his son after he learned he was disabled. Izuku gritted his teeth in anger at the thought of his father. The bastard caused his mother so much pain and heartbreak. At the time he was just as hurt as he was when he left, but over time he just disregarded him from his life. The only family he had left was his mother. She mattered to him more than anything, and he hated to see her cry. He always took care of her as she did with him. His father walking out took a toll on her a lot more than it did to him. Putting his father aside, his thoughts went straight to his mother and co. He had so many moments that he loved the most the time he spent with his mother. But now he can't even remember the last time he saw her. Out of everybody he met, she was the only one who told him that he could be a hero. Others shut him down, saying that it was too dangerous or that he couldn't be one. There's no room for quirkless to become heroes. But even with all the discouragement and insults, Inko was the only person that never gave up on him. Then came the day he was taken. He was taken from his mother and was experimented on for a project. He and 3 others were selected for some project called Project Apocalypse. They were trying to create their own 4 horsemen, then use them to take over Tokyo. A damn project that nearly ended up with them killing each other, but they were able to break out and kill their captors. But the sad part about was, they couldn't go back to their lives. They couldn't go back to their homes, the families they loved so much, because they were now killers. Not heroes, not villains ... and not vigilantes. Killers. Izuku sighed to himself as he laid his head back onto the soft grass field underneath him and just closed his eyes for a second. He was about to enjoy the nice long breeze of the cold air until, hey, wake up. A voice called out to him. Izuku felt something nudge his shoulder with a rough object, but he ignored it and nearly turned his head over to resume his peaceful sleepy. Suddenly he felt someone turn him on his back and add weight to his stomach. Opening his eyes, he saw a girl with shoulder-length brown hair, big brown eyes and rosy cheeks. She had on a cloak over herself, but her legs were showing as she sat on top of him. Deku, she called out, poking his freckled cheek with her finger, causing the boy to open his eyes. Ochako-san, what is it? He asked, gazing into her eyes. We're out of food. Food or souls? He asked her. Real food, this time. She answered him. I don't have enough ingredients to make enough food for everyone, but we're almost out of food, so someone needs to make a run to the grocery store. All right, fine, I'll do it, but later, he said, waving his hand, and tried to turn his head, but Ochako stopped him and pulled his cheeks. Oh, you're going to do it now. Yuri's gonna be up in a few minutes, and I don't want her to start the day with an empty stomach, she said with a frown on her face. Okay. Izuku sighed as he sat up with Ochako still in his lap, facing her head on. Just make me a list, and I'll get it. Already did, she said, holding up a small piece of paper. Really? He asked, giving her a blank stare. A girl's gotta be ready for anything that may happen, she said, winking at him. Besides, usually you would be on top of this since you're the most organized person out of everyone. She teased him, making the latter grumble. I know. he said, rolling his eyes playfully before grabbing the list from her hands and went over the list, eyes moving back and forth as descended the list before nodding his head. Okay, I got it. Thanks, she said, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Make sure to get extra apples for Eri. Ochako stood up, reminding him as she went back inside. Right, he replied as she closed the door behind her. Getting up, he was wearing a black cloak like Ochako, but his had some tears like he was representing the actual Grim Reaper covering his body, and stopped at his feet. Stretching, he summoned his weapon and set it against his back, just in case he had to fight or run into a morning snack. Time to go, he said to himself as he jumped off the roof of his building and onto another, doing the same thing multiple times until he found a spot for him to descend from the rooftops and blend in. The brunette was on the couch in a living room with a small child in her arms. She had white hair, pale skin, and a horn protruding from the side of her head. Ochako smiled as she softly brushed the child's bangs away from her face. She then started thinking back to her old life before they ended up like this. Her parents, she wonders how they are doing right now. Ochako Uraraka used to be a bubbly girl around others and would always have the brightest smiles to make anyone's day better. But ever since that night of the kidnapping, where she was taken away from her parents and became a potential subject for a stupid project, she doesn't really have those qualities about herself anymore. It all happened too fast. 1 second, she was with her parents saying goodnight and headed off to bed. And the next thing that happens is something piercing her neck and she instantly felt woozy. Later, she finds herself waking up in a cell cuffed in chains. It was a horrible feeling. She was so confused and lost, wanting nothing more than to return home, but could not, no matter what she could try. Mama. Ochako was brought out of her thoughts as a little girl tugged onto her cloak. Looking down, she was met with innocent bright red eyes gazing into her own. This was Eri. Hi, sweetie. The brunette softly smiled at the child, who was now wide awake. What's wrong? You were making that face again, Eri said as she gave Ochako a demonstration of her own blank stare to emphasize her point. Stare? Yeah, sorry. Ochako apologized. Why are you sad? Eri asked. I'm just reminiscing on my old life before I was taken, she said as she turned her gaze to the TV before them, seeing a hero take down some thugs from a robbery. Before I lost everything. What do you mean, you didn't lose everything? Eri said as she gave Ochako a sideways look. You have me, Papa, Auntie, and Uncle. Ochako couldn't help but giggle at her sweet, naive look. Eri didn't understand the meaning of losing something because the child never really had anything to lose. She was still new to the outside world and its cruel nature. Yes, you're right, I do have you and Papa, she said, laying Eri on her back and started tickling the child's belly, earning giggles. She's still small and innocent. And fragile. Very fragile, the brunette thought as she turned her attention to the TV. Thinking back to when she and Izuku found her, she was afraid of anyone that came close to her, as if she was expecting to be taken or attacked. If she hadn't found her, she didn't even want to think about what had happened to the child in her arms. The only thing that matters right now is that she is safe with her and away from anything that could harm her. Mama, Eri called out, bringing the teen out of her thoughts once again. Are heroes bad? Eri asked her. Ochako raised an eyebrow at this. As far as she knows, Eri saw heroes saving people on TV. There was that one time with Endeavor, but other than that, no one else. Heroes weren't necessarily good or bad. They were just people who dress in costumes to protect the weak from criminals. PFFT. Yeah, that'll be the day. The strong will always strive on the weak, using them for their own means to fulfill their own selfish desires. They're not all that bad, sweetie. Ochako started, her tone sounding gentle. They're good people who want to protect the city from very bad people. What made you think that heroes were bad? Papa. He's always looking sad whenever he sees a hero on TV, she said, pointing to the TV. I thought heroes were bad because they made Papa sad, she added, making Ochako understand her statement. Izuku always wanted to be a hero like his idol. He wanted to save people like other heroes, but he couldn't. And then there was their time in the project where they broke his spirit by forcing him to kill others. It made her sad that he cannot save people as a hero anymore. I guess you could say that. Papa is still having a hard time adjusting to his new role and reality we live in. He doesn't hate heroes. It's just that he can't be one now because of him being a host to death and all, she explained as the child tilted her head. Ochako wasn't worried about Eri knowing about what happened to her and the others because the little girl had seen it all. She had seen people die as well, either from her quirk or when the birdmen killed them. As for pain, she just accepted it. No crying, screaming, or anything. She just took it because it was the only thing she could feel. Pain and emptiness were the only emotions she could feel until she met her Ochako and Izuku, who she refers to as her parents. They were the first people to give her affection. Eri saw them as family instantly because of the affection she received. It was a new feeling that was so warm and comfortable, different from the cold and empty feelings she had inside her. She loved it and never wanted to lose it, grabbing on and never wanting to let go. But you and Papa are heroes, Eri exclaimed as she stared at her mother with a pout. Mama and Papa wouldn't be heroes if they haven't saved me, she declared, staring into the brunette's eyes challengingly. The brunette looked at her dazed for a second before softly giggling and wrapped a child in another embrace. You're right, I guess we wouldn't. Thank you, Iri, for cheering me up. And just for that you get to decide what we get to have dinner. Yeah, Iri said, bouncing up and down in Achako's arms. What's with all the racket? A voice called out from the other side of the room. Looking over, Achako and Iri saw a teenage boy with spiky ash blonde hair and red eyes. He had a scowl on his face as he leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Good morning, Kakin. Did you have a good night's sleep? The brunette said, calling him by his nickname, making the latter's scowl deepen. Morning, uncle, Iri replied, waving happily at her uncle. I thought I told you not to call me that round face. He sneered at Achako before turning his gaze towards Iri, losing his scowl slightly. Morning, kid. Where's the FWA? He looked down at the child before rethinking his words. Where's Deku? Achako inwardly smirked at the fact that Katsuki could not curse in front of Iri. As long as she was within range, he could not do his usual swearing because if he did, she would kill him, not Izuku, her. He's out making a quick run to the grocery store, she answered. By himself. Katsuki scoffed as Achako nodded her head. Well, that's a stupid idea. Why didn't you go with him? 1, it's a 5-minute walk from here to the market. 2, he's not going far. As long as he's within distance, I can sense if or when he starts to panic. And 3, you are still sleeping, she said sternly as Katsuki turned his head away. Whatever, he muttered as he walked out of the living room to another. Iri giggled as he left. Uncle's funny and grumpy, she laughed. Yeah, he is, Achako agreed. Katsuki's always angry, ribbit. A voice called from beside them as they saw a girl with frog-like features enter the room. It's just his personality. That's why I think he will never be a happy person. What was that frog face? Katsuki shouted, peering his head to gaze at the girl who only pointed at him with her finger. See, she said with a smile while the blonde left the room muttering a few incoherent words. Auntie Tsu, Iri shouted as she jumped up from Achako's lap into the Tsuyu's arms, the latter laughing as she caught her. And how are you doing, little Miss Tadpole? She asked, calling her by nickname. Iri giggled as the frog girl tickled her in her arms. Achako smiled at them as the two started having a tickle war, so she decided to leave the room to them. She exited the family room and walked down the hallway where it had multiple empty door-shaped spaces where it led to other rooms. Besides the family room, there was the bathroom, the kitchen, dining hall that had a path to the living room and the laundry room. At the end of the hall there was the front door and a path of stairs leading upwards with 2 sets. Going down the hall she went upstairs, and at the top of the last step she immediately turned right, entering the room located right next to the steps and closed the door behind her. Entering, she took off her cloak and set it aside on a chair before turning around to look in the mirror. Looking at herself, she sighed sadly, seeing the scars on her arms, legs, and stomach. Disregarding her image, she then opened her closet and picked out a pair of clothes to wear since she wasn't going anywhere out in the city. She put on a black tank top with a sports bra underneath and a pair of black shorts. Leaving the room and coming down the stairs, she was greeted with the sight of Izuku, who suddenly emerged in front of the stairs, mist surrounding his body. I'm back with the groceries, he said, holding the bags full of food. Achako gave him a slight glare before speaking. You know we have a door, right? She jerked her finger over to the wooden frame as Izuku smiled sheepishly. Right, sorry about that. He apologized as Achako descended from the stairs and shook her head at him, her glare gone and replaced with a smile. Silly boy, she teased, poking his nose and walking past him. Come on, help me set up. Hi, he agreed as they walked to the kitchen, putting the groceries and preparing meals for the morning. Detective Tsukachi Naomasa was in his office at his desk in annoyance. He just got done arresting and putting away the villain that All Might had dropped off, and now he has 2 files sitting on his desk waiting to be read. Sai Evil never sleeps, he said as he sat down and opened the first file. As he read the contents, he went over a few pictures first. He saw a photo of a mutilated body and a head severed with blood leaking, making the captain cringe in disgust. Setting the photo aside, he came onto another dead body. On this one was badly burnt, and there was fire still licking the skin, leaving burnt flesh or what was left of it. He grimaced at the photo once again before setting it aside and looked through the rest of them. All of photos were gruel and gory, as most of them involved chopped heads, severed or crushed limbs, and gouged eyes. Honestly, this was too much. It wasn't a big deal until Naomasa looked up at the title of the case and the names of the people that were killed in these photos. One of them was a very particular name that he knew too well. The 8 Precepts of Death. Tai Chisaki Aka, Overhaul. Hari Kirono Aka, Chronostasis. Riki Akatsukame. Shin Namoto. Kendo Rappa. Toya Setsuno. Ilhojo. Sorimitsu Tabe. Deidoro Sakaki. Hekaji Tengai. Naomasa was left in a state of shock at what he just read. 8 out of 10 violent criminals of the Yakuza were killed just like that, and the photos showed that the bodies were barely recognizable. It was like whoever fought them had a grudge or score to settle and gave them brutal deaths. The detective honestly felt a little sick to his stomach. He wondered that whoever killed them was related to this mess. Could it have been a gang war? Or it was an operation gone wrong? There were too many variables in this. It wasn't until he realized that he looked up back at Overhaul's and Chronostati's status, they were still missing. Well, not for long. Suddenly a scream echoed through the department and Naomasa rushed out of his office and into the main hall, his gun ready for who was here. "What's wrong? What happened?" he asked frantically. In the room, all the cops around him were frozen in shock and horror as if they saw something so frightening. A female cop beside him shakily pointed towards the box at the door of the department. "There's the box, you need to see the box," she said. Naomasa slowly nodded his head and walked over towards the box. It was a big box and inside was a cooler. "Wait a minute, a cooler?" Naomasa approached the said object and put away his gun before kneeling. He then reached his hands towards the handle of the cooler very slowly. Sweat started dripping down his forehead. His hand gripped the handle and he let out a small gulp in anticipation. Grasping the handle, he then opened the cooler very fast, too fast, and out came a head rolling on the floor. The head stopped rolling onto the side and revealed the face. The mouth was wide open, and it had one eye missing while the other was blood red and had a huge hole in the middle of the forehead. "Oh my God," Naomasa thought grimly as he heard a few detectives screamed at the sight of the head or others lose their lunches into trash bins. He was compelled to do the same, but he fought the urge and kept himself from doing so. He examined the facial features of the head and instantly realized who it was. "That's Kaichizaki," he thought before looking back into the box. He found a small note inside with blood all over it. He carefully picked up the note and turned it over, seeing words written in black. "How do you like my gift? Sorry, but this poor bastard deserved it after everything he did. 2 more boxes of his body parts and that other mask freak are scattered within the police station. Go ahead and find it. Oh, one more thing. Expect to find the next box you receive with a video on it. Have fun." "Well, that's one person I found, but where is his assistant?" he asked until he saw another picture. "P.S. Here's a preview of the other masked freak when you find him." Picking it up, he saw something and immediately paled at what was on it. He quickly ordered someone to pick up the boxes and take them to the coroner before running to the nearest trash bin ... and lost his lunch. Whoever did this has a sick, twisted personality and was a serial psychopath. After breakfast, Ochako and Izuku were sitting on a couch in the living room with Eri and Katsuki on the floor, the latter holding the former in his lap as she played on a 3DS. He introduced the young girl to it when they were alone in the house one day and curiosity got the best of her. Unfortunately, he did not have any games that were non-violent, so before he let play the device, he bought her Animal Crossing and let her figure out her way to play. He would never live that down thanks to Round Face. He would never admit it, but if pushed the wrong way, she could be scary as hell. "Look," Eri shouted, bringing the blonde out of his thoughts. Turning to the child, he saw the image showing a little house with a few people celebrating around. "I build a house. That's great, kid," he said, trying to find the right words to say. "Mama, Papa, look, you build a little house all by yourself." Ochako cooed at the child before pinching her cheeks. "I'm so proud of you." Mama, stop, no pinching." Eri whined, waving her hands at her mother's, trying to get the pinchers off her cheeks. "I can't help it, you're so cute," Ochako said as she continued pinching the child. Katsuki just rolled his eyes before turning his head back to the TV while Izuku flipped through channels. Then something caught his attention. "Deku," he called. "Yeah, go 2 channels back and turn up the volume," Katsuki said. Izuku did what he said and went back, the channel number being the news, and turned up the volume. "We are live in Hasu City, where a team of pro heroes have taken down a slime villain and rescuing a number of citizens. The slime villain attempted to consume citizens and used their own quirks against the public, wreaking havoc." "A slime villain," Izuku said. "I wished I was there to see it. Or if they have any live footage of the fight, that would be great. Please don't. It's annoying enough that you already got us and all the other heroes you have in your book," Katsuki said with an irritated expression. "Do you really need to add more?" "Yes, Kaken," he answered sternly. "You never know what's going to happen against someone with a powerful quirk. You need to know their advantages, strengths, weaknesses, pretty much everything about their quirk," he explained. "I was being sarcastic," Katsuki shot with a scowl. "Then you should have said it was a rhetorical question," Izuku fired back, earning a giggle from Ochako, who was still occupied with Eri's cheeks, the latter pouting as she gave up on stopping her mother. "Whatever, stupid Deku," the blonde said, returning his head to the screen. In other news, while that was going down, another incident took place as the hero Endeavor fought against a villain with a fire quirk. His fire was stronger than the number 2 heroes, but thanks to the intervention All Might, the number 1 and 2 heroes were able to beat him. The fight between these 2 heroes and villain reminded me of a similar incident that took place a few years back in Tokyo, where a rank villain blazed. Click. All heads were confused as the TV suddenly turned off. Hey Deku, turn the TV back on, will ya? Katsuki said in an annoyed tone, turning his head to look at Izuku only to see the latter leaving the room. Ochako stared at the spot Izuku was in earlier before letting go of Eri. Katsu, please watch Eri for a second. I'm going to go talk with Deku, she said to the hothead. Yeah, just make sure Deku doesn't get all sappy and whatnot. It annoys me to no end when he's like that. He scoffed at the brunette, then turned his attention to Eri. Come on, brat, show me what else you build on that game. The child ignored his temper at the sound of him wanting to see what else she created on her game brought excitement to her eyes, and she ran over to him before proceeding to show him her creation. The brunette silently thanked him for distracting Eri before leaving and went to find Izuku. She knew what was going through his head, and he could have another episode any minute. Out of everybody, when it came to mental breakdowns, Izuku had the worst. Katsuki was a best second. He barely had any episodes of his own, but because of his explosive temper and personality combined with being a bit of a battle freak, she assumed he was close. Then came her and Tsuyu. She walked up the steps and arrived at his room, which was right across from hers. Paused. Taking a small breath, she grasped the doorknob and turned the handle slowly, opening the door as creaking sound was heard. Deku, she called softly as she peered her head inside the room. Looking around, she saw him curled up in a ball in the farthest corner from the door and windows. Ochako entered the room and then closed the door behind her. Walking over to him, she crouched down and sat beside him once more. She could feel his aura. It was becoming hollow. The air around them was giving a deathly chill, but it didn't bother her. His form was trembling, and his breathing was erratic. He was starting to hyperventilate. Izuku, she called him as she slowly grasped both of his hands. He flinched at the contact. She ignored it and slowly removed his hands so she could see his face. Once done, she was met with scared green eyes. Izuku, breath, she cooed as she brought his head into an embrace and started running her fingers through his hair to comfort him. It seemed to be working as she felt him starting to slow down and his breathing was returning to normal. Ochako, he called weakly as his green eyes focused onto her chocolate brown eyes. Hey there, she said. You back in the real world? Izuku frowned at her words, knowing what she was talking about. If he was lost, it meant he was close to having another episode. It happened again, didn't it? Yes, Ochako answered as she continued playing with his hair. I can't believe he's still here. Even after breaking my mother's heart, he's still roaming free like the villain he is, and yet I haven't killed him, Izuku said as his hands started shaking in anger. I haven't gone out and killed him for everything he did. To society, to those people, my mother, and me. His eyes then started glow as his death alter ego took over. I should go and find him and send his rotten corpse straight to H. Izuku, Ochako called out to him, her voice tone filled with authority. Izuku glared with raging eyes into her own calm ones. She was accepting his challenge. He was about to grab her arm, but she was faster than them. She used her free hand to grip his forearm and stared into his eyes. Calm down, she ordered, using her own voice instead of having help from her own alter ego. She knew it would be enough. As if a flip switch in his head, Izuku immediately snapped out of his state, and realization quickly hit him as soon as he saw his arm gripped by her hand. I'm sorry, he apologized as he lifted his head from her lap. He was about to move away, but Ochako placed a hand underneath his chin, turning his attention to her. It's okay, she said softly before pulling him and herself up from the floor. She then noticed the circles around his eyes. When was the last time he slept? You need some rest, she said as he shook his head negatively. I'm okay, he objected softly, but Ochako was having none of his stubbornness right now. His sleep is more important. Deku, she called out to him with a stern tone. He flinched at her tone before frowning and turning his head away from her. I don't want to deal with the nightmares again, he whispered to himself as he remembered his latest nightmare from before. Do you want me to stay? She asked him. I'm in and no, that's okay. I'll be fine, he stuttered. Deku, Ochako let out a sigh as she gazed at him with sad eyes. She knew that he wouldn't lean on her or anyone for help. He doesn't want to be a burden to anybody. Not like it will stop her. You're resting, she said firmly before touching his cheek gently. Izuku looked confused before realizing what she was doing, but it was already too late as the brunette's hand glowed with a pink aura before fading away. Few seconds later, he felt dizzy and tired as he started wobbling backwards. Ochako placed her fingers on his forehead as pink sparkles glittered above him. Suddenly he was floating in the air, weightless, as the brunette slowly dragged his form over to the bed. Once his shadow was over the mattress, she draped the covers down before pressing her fingers together as pink sparkles glittered around her hands, and he dropped onto the bed. Once he was down, she climbed into the bed with him and draped the covers over them both as she stared at Izuku. Oh, Ochako, that wasn't fair. He tried to glare at her, but he didn't have the strength to do so. I'm sorry, Deku, but you need to sleep. You've been sleep-deprived long enough, Ochako said, placing a hand on his cheek with a soft smile. Go to sleep, I'll be right here with you. She then pressed her lips against his temple. Izuku tried to fight the urge to sleep, but with Ochako taking his energy, he couldn't fight back. His eyes felt droopy and within seconds he succumbed to sleep. Releasing her lips, the brunette gazed down at the boy in front of her. He's so cute when he's sleeping, she thought lovingly as she carted her fingers through his hair, giving comfort. She then frowned as she remembered him mentioning that he didn't want to go back to the nightmares. He sounded so scared, as if he saw something traumatizing. It explains the dark rings around his eyes. The nightmare he's having. Whatever it is, it's keeping him from getting sleep. Achako sighed to herself as she wrapped an arm around the boy's back, pulling herself closer. Sleep well, Deku, she said, pressing a kiss to his cheek. She leaned her forehead against his and let sleep take her. Minutes later, the door opened silently, revealing Eri and Katsuki. Eri was getting tired and she wanted to sleep on Katsuki's lap. The latter didn't mind, but he had somewhere to go and he needed to find Frog Face. So he went to set her with Deku and Round Face, only to find the two asleep. Of freaking course, he muttered to himself in slight irritation. Eri let go of his hand and made her way to the bed before climbing up onto it. She slipped twice trying to climb and the blonde was about to help her, but she succeeded on the third try. She crawled her tiny knees over their legs and positioned herself in between the lovebirds with her head underneath their chins. She let out a tiny little yawn before she dozed off with a peaceful look on her face. Closing the door gently, Katsuki left the three alone before heading out with a location in mind and an objective. Head to the cemetery and find Frog Face. Sui was a normal girl who was straightforward with everything she said and done and was a laid-back individual. Now she's a girl with a new family, new lifestyle, and a killer. The last one hurt her heart a lot. She was a killer because of Project Apocalypse. Those scientists that experimented on her and her embodiment Pestilence, all just so they can take over Japan. It was pathetic. To think that they could control her after everything they did to her, it was pathetic. She swore to kill them as soon as she broke free of her chains. She thought she could take them on her own, but they caught her when she tried to escape. She failed time and time again because not only were they prepared for it, but at the time she was consumed with hatred. The night they kidnapped her, her family was taken away. It broke her. She was forced to see them tortured, their limbs chopped off one by one. Injected with numerous poisons, the torture to her family was tearing her apart. No matter how many times she begged, no matter how many times she pleaded her captors to let them go, it was futile. In the end, she was forced to watch them all get slaughtered like animals. It shattered her soul. She cried her heart out relentlessly, seeing them hurt because of her. She could never forgive herself for it. And now here she was in the cemetery in front of 4 graves, starting from her mother going down to her sister. Each gravestone holding different bouquets of flowers. She would get new ones every 2 weeks. Haika-san, Tu-san, Sander-san, Satsuki-san. She started off before her eyes became glossy and tears ran down her cheeks before she could even speak. Soon her body was racked with guilt as she collapsed to her knees and gripped the grass beneath her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," Suyu said solemnly as she remained on her knees, sobbing to herself as she relived the memories of her family before their last moments alive. She didn't know how long she was in the cemetery, nor did she care. The only thing that mattered right now was her previously deceased frog family. She didn't know how long she was there, nor did she care. The only sounds going through her ears were the drops of water hitting the ground. It started raining sometime after she started crying, but she paid no mind to the weather. She was still reeling from reliving the memories of her family's deaths. She stared at the ground with dead eyes before gazing up at the gravestones. "Gomnasai, family," she said as she walked from the graves and towards the path leading back to the entrance, leading to the main gate where she would meet up with Katsuki. Little did she know that someone from afar was watching them. Suyu and Katsuki were walking back home as the rain continued pouring down onto the street. The latter didn't have an umbrella, so he was wearing a gray sleeveless hoodie while the former casually enjoyed the weather. "You sure you don't want an umbrella, amphibian?" "I'm fine, Ribbit. It's natural for a frog to be in a wet and sticky environment. It's where males and females meet." "Oh my god, shut up. I don't care. I just asked if you were fine. Not give a lecture on damn frogs. I was only trying to talk," Suyu said, frowning at his words and found the pavement more interesting. Katsuki immediately sighed in frustration. He wasn't sure how to cheer up his companion without throwing in some type of insult or yelling. He wasn't the best person to come to when it came to comfort. "Sorry, Frog Fa. Suyu, I'm not someone that knows how to help someone with their problems. That's usually Round Face and Deku." Suyu's sweat dropped at her friend's apology. "You really need to stop calling them that, Katsuki. It's alright. The important part is that you're trying." "Ribbit," she said, staring at him with her 1,000-mile blank stare. "You know I can't really tell if you're happy or not with that death stare of yours," Katsuki said, squinting his eyebrows. "Death stare," Suyu repeated as she placed a finger on her chin. "I guess my face does scare people a bit. Is it that bad?" "Never mind," he said, getting irritated by the second as the rain continued dropping down. "When will this damn weather let up?" Suddenly Tsuyu grabbed his wrist and started running, confusing the blonde. "What the? Hey, Frog Face," he shouted, irritated that he had no clue of what Tsuyu was doing. She completely ignored him as they both ran through the rain. They continued like this for minutes until Tsuyu spotted a sign and quickly ran inside along with Katsuki muttering some curses. What the hell, frog face? You seemed bothered by the rain, Ribbit, so I thought that if I found a place to hang it until the rain let up then you would be okay. Tsuyu spoke, ignoring the scowl on his face. But thinking about it now, I probably should have said something before running. You think? He shouted in an annoyed tone before the color of the wall caught his eye. Losing his scowl, he turned his head and noticed that they were in an empty shop with ice cream machines along the left side of the room and a toppings bar on the right. Katsuki's eyebrows twitched furiously as he stared at the colorful themed shop in front of them. You brought us to a damn ice cream shop. Yes, it was this or the library across the street. Tsuyu answered as she tilted her head at the blonde. Would you say no to an ice cream sundae? Whatever, you're buying, he growled, but Tsuyu shook her head. Shouldn't the guy be the gentleman and buy ice cream for their lady? We're not even dating, he exclaimed. Says who? She asks, leaving him speechless as he stared at her with his mouth wide open. The frog then let out a small laugh as a fly randomly flew into Katsuki's mouth, snapping him out of his state. Choking, he coughed it back up eventually by pounding his chest harshly before it left his body. Seeing the fly, he was about to incinerate it until Tsuyu used her tongue to catch it. I'm just kidding, Ribbit. Even if we were on a date, I doubt you would actually be gentleman enough to pay for my meal, she said as she headed over to the counter to grab a plastic bowl and started filling it with ice cream. Katsuki quickly got out of his shock and raised his right hand, his palm dancing with small sparks of his quirk. He was tempted to strangle the female reptile or blow her up, but stopped as he went back to twitching at her. I swear to God, if this storm doesn't let up within the next half hour, I will blow up this entire block and it will all be Frog Face's fault, he thought before thinking back to his bit with the fly and smirked a bit. At least she ain't sad anymore, he muttered to himself before thinking about his own family, specifically one person, his face morphing into a frown. I wonder how my own old hag mother is doing. Ochako woke up to the sounds of heavy breathing and panting. When she awoke, she was met with Izuku's fearful expression, and what seemed to a dark aura was slowly surrounding his body. Ochako instantly shot up from her spot and looked over him with a worried gaze, wondering what was going on with him. Deku, the brunette called out softly before seeing Eri shift in her sleep. As the child woke, she let out a cute yawn, rubbing her eyes with her forearm as she looked up at Ochako. Mama, Eri. Ochako gazed at her daughter in confusion. She didn't even notice that her daughter was in the room with them, but forget that. When did you get in here? I was sleepy. Uncle Kaken brought me here, she answered after letting out another yawn. Where is your uncle now? She asked her. Whatever was going with Izuku, she didn't want Eri to get caught in the way and get hurt. Since Tsuyu was gone, she needed the explosive teenager to take Eri out of the room and distract her, but fate was not on her side as the child shook her head in an unsure manner. I don't know. He said something about going to get Aunt Sue, Eri answered her, a little confused on seeing her mother's expression morph into alarm. Ochako was about to ask for more until she felt an ominous chill in the air. Looking over to the boy, her eyes widened in alarm. Izuku's face was quickly becoming pale as sweat dripped down his forehead, but that wasn't the only problem. The shadow figure above him was the main problem, though. It was his partner, Death, and it was smiling creepily at his host. Yes, child, that's what I need to see. You, helpless in your own mind while I slowly devoured your soul and make you into someone new. Your fear, your sorrow, your guilt, your doubt, everything negative about you is what makes you strong. That positive, cheery attitude of yours is nothing but a weakness you do not need. It's shadowing your true nature, your true self. It must be cleansed. Cleanse it, and all that shall remain is your true self. The Grim Reaper. The entity howled in anger before cackling with laughter. Ochako clicked her teeth in frustration. His tenant was trying to take over his soul again. This only happened twice during their time in captivity, but it was only forcibly triggered. This time Death seemed to be acting out on its own, and its behavior towards Izuku was not good. The brunette was brought out of her thoughts when she felt a tug on her shorts. Turning down, she saw Eri giving her a scared look as her eyes were glossy. Mama, what's wrong with Papa? She asked frantically, scared of the entity above Izuku and seeing his looks of pain. Ochako kneeled to her level, placing her hands on her shoulders firmly. Eri, I need you to go to your room, okay? Ochako said, but the white-haired girl shook her head. No, Uncle's not here. I want to stay with you and Papa. Eri, please, she said firmly, the little girl slightly flinching at her mother's tone. Stay there until I call for you, okay? Ochako didn't want her to be here for this. She didn't need Eri to see Izuku in pain. Will Papa be okay? She asked her. She was afraid. She was afraid that if she leave, then something bad might happen to him. She wanted to stay even though her mind was telling her to leave, but she couldn't. Ochako saw the scared look on Eri's face and gave her a soft smile. She knew that she was afraid of leaving them alone, but to them Eri's safety mattered more than their own. He'll be okay. I'll make sure of it. I'll come get you once I'm done, she cooed as Eri stared into her calm eyes. Eri looked at her mother with worry, then back at her father, who was writhing in pain. I want to stay, but if Mama says Papa will be okay, then Okay, she answered reluctantly, nodding her head. Thank you, sweetie. Ochako pressed her lips to her cheek before the little girl ran to the door, giving Izuku one last look before leaving. Ochako followed the child out the door and watched her go to her room before closing the door. Now that Eri was safe, she could get to work on Izuku and get his demon under control before it consumes him. Huh. Katsuki paused as he felt an ominous chill go through his body as if something bad had happened to the others. You felt that too, right? Tsuyu asked, looking at Katsuki with a worried expression. Yeah, it's Deku. He might be having another one of those episodes, he said, already knowing what was happening. Then we should get back to them. Ribbit, she said, ready to leave, but Katsuki waved it off. Don't worry about it, Deku's fine. He's got round face and Eri to watch over him, he said casually. And how would you know that? Tsuyu asked, her stare turning into a glare which unfazed him. We both know that even though Izuku has them for help, he still has the worst case of PTSD, being forced to kill people daily. She paused her speech before her glare hardened at remembering the thought of the sick experiments. Even kids can scar you for rest of your life. Katsuki scoffed in anger, but inwardly he knew that she was right. Even though all of them had been forced to kill others at one point, none of them had to do more than him and Izuku. Just thinking about what his friend had to go through pissed him off more than seeing it. While they both had to kill certain patients that were deemed unstable and crazy to the point of no return, there were times when they had captured innocent people for them to kill. For some reason, they decided to put all of that on Izuku. Katsuki could see the light in his eyes slowing die out every time he was forced to kill someone. He could remember the cries he would hear all night after he was done. Hearing his childhood friend cries of pain and despair at what he had done just made him want to go out there and kill the bastards. But they couldn't. At the time, he had no control over his own apocalyptic ghost and his quirk was sealed. He couldn't do anything to help his friend and it sickened him. Round face. Ochako was his cellmate back then and she helped him through tough times. He could never really hide anything from her, which was why he wasn't worried about Izuku's episodes. As long as she was there with him, he would be fine. She had the most experience on how to help calm him down. True, but Round Face knows how to help him more than I could. I'm not exactly the best person to go to for comfort, he replied. That's true, Tsuyu said calmly as she took another scoop of her ice cream and slipped it into her mouth. You're more of a go-to-anger guy. If someone has a death wish, we'll just call you for help. Very funny. If we're being serious here, you might as well call me Lord Explosion Murder, he said sarcastically before cruelly smirking at the end. Don't you think that's a bit too far? She asked with a blank stare. Not a chance, he said, rolling his eyes as Tsuyu sighed at his words. What a hothead, she thought to herself before getting back to the matter at hand. Still, don't you think that we should at least go check on them now? She pressed further, not wanting to stay in the shop any longer than she wants to. Do I look like I want to go in the rain and get sick? He asked sarcastically as outstretching his arm towards the outside as rain continued pouring down roughly. Doesn't seem like a problem to me, she said, tilting her head a bit. Of course it's not a problem to you, you're a frog, he shouted mentally as tick marks appeared on his forehead. Sigh, fine. How about this? Since you're so worried about them, just go and head back to the house. He sighed in exasperation. Let's just finish our ice cream and then we can. Actually, I'm quite finished, the frog girl replied as she showed her bowl, completely empty of any ice cream. How the hell do you even eat that fast? Katsuki growled comically. Tsuyu just shrugged her shoulders before walking out of the shop and into an alleyway. Making sure no one was around, she did a froggy jump sticking to the wall before repeating the process until she was on the rooftops and made her way back home. Katsuki grumbled to himself about damn frogs and their ability to adapt to cold weather and all types of other stuff. He picked up his and Tsuyu's empty cups and tossed them in the trash. He then put on his hoodie again and started going off in the opposite direction of home. I need to make sure they don't follow me home. Once I'm far enough, I can deal with them, he thought as he walked into an alley with another exit down the block. As he continued walking, he suddenly heard laughter, poor maniacal laughter in his opinion. Hello there. Looking behind himself, Katsuki saw a man in the form of sewage sludge with evil eyes. Looks like today's my lucky day. An appetite walking all alone for me to eat. Don't worry, kid. This will only take 3/4 of a minute. Then you're dead. The sludge villain then stretched over to Katsuki and wrapped his body onto his own. He didn't notice the bored look Katsuki had on his face when he took over. As soon as Katsuki was completely covered, the sludge villain laughed maniacally. Now that's an appetite. Now let's see what kind of quirk you have before I dispose of you. The sludge villain was interrupted when he heard something that sounded like a crack in his body. Looking down, his eyes widened in horror as he saw his feet turn solid. Soon it traveled all the way up to his body, and before he could scream, his mouth was closed. He was now completely solid. Suddenly, multiple rays came off his body, and next thing that happened, the stone figure blew up into pieces, scattering across the alleyway and the walls, as well as blood. Pathetic, Katsuki said as he dusted off any remaining stones that had slime on it. Here's a hint. Next time you want to take over someone, do a little research on them, you might learn something. Oh wait, I forgot. He turned back to the blood on the wall and let out a cruel smile. You're dead, he said as his right eye glowed red and an entity hovered over his form. As the ghost disappeared, Katsuki sneered at the remains before walking away and out of the alley onto a different street. Behind him, up on a rooftop watching, the person following him was a pro hero named Stealth. A pro hero who liked to remain hidden from society like the underground hero Eraserhead. He was a tall man wearing a mask covering up to his nose. He had red eyes and black hair, a black vest with a shirt underneath and military cargo pants and boots. His quirk was camouflage, which allowed his entire body and clothing to blend in with the environment and cloak his presence. Stealth was watching the blonde with a stern expression. After following him and Tsuyu from the cemetery and seeing the familiar faces, he was sure that it was who he was searching for. The missing 4. Those were the children he was assigned to search for. He's been to every secret facility that was related to the Project Apocalypse. He found the notes on other patients and the tests they would do, but he could never find anything related to them. Until a month ago when they broke free. He was the one that found the bodies of the other patients or scientists that were either burnt, mutilated, decapitated, or eyeless. It was a pretty messy scene, like the job was done by villains, but it wasn't. It was by them for all their time in captivity. And they wanted revenge. Well, they got it. He wasn't sure if they would get labeled as villains. If you killed someone, you're basically labeled as a villain. But to Stealth, it didn't matter if they had killed them. They were kids, and they still are. After reading what he found on them and how they were all experimented through everything, he would have killed them himself if they hadn't. Still, given what they had went through, there's no telling what to expect from them. Were they now teenagers lost in the world of quirks looking for a way home, or are they teenagers out to make the world suffer for their pain? He doesn't know the answer. Seeing Katsuki basically kill a villain with no remorse set alarms in his head. If he was like this, then were the other 3 the same, or is it just him? At this point, there were too many questions that needed answering. For right now, he needed to keep track and confront the blonde with extreme caution. Tsuyu arrived at her home and barged through the door, her eyes in alarm. She felt Izuku's ghost stop releasing his aura a few minutes ago, and it worried her. Thinking that something bad happened, she quickly leaped over the rooftops faster than ever. Izuku, Onchako, Iri, she shouted, slamming the door shut, and looked around for them. Auntie Tsu, the frog quirk user, turned her head at the stairs and saw Iri looking at her with confusion. Before the little girl could ask what's wrong, Tsuyu jumped up to the railing and over and wrapped Iri in an embrace. Thank goodness you're safe, Ribbit, she said while Iri quickly tried to get her surrogate aunt to let her go. But Auntie, too tight, she shouted the best she could as the frog user noticed and let her down before apologizing. Sorry, Yuri, she said while the child let a pout play onto her lips and crossed her arms childishly. Tsuyu then remembered why she came in. Yuri, where is Izuku and Ochako? The child pointed her fingers towards Izuku's room. They're in there, Yuri said, letting a frown morph her expression. Papa was hurt, and he looked scared. Mama told me to wait in my room until he was okay. Yuri's eyes started getting glossy and her lips trembled as the anxiety and fear was killing her, not knowing what would happen to her adoptive father. He's gonna be okay, right? She asked the older girl, her voice close to breaking and letting out tears. Tsuyu saw this and quickly went on her knees before wiping Yuri's tears away with her fingers. He's gonna be fine, little tadpole, Tsuyu reassured her, even though she wasn't sure about it herself. As much as she hated lying, she doesn't want to upset the child any further, seeing as she was close to having a breakdown. She was brought out of her thoughts when the door beside them opened and out came Ochako with a soft smile on her face. Looking beside the door, she saw Iri and Tsuyu. Okay, sweetie, you can go and see him now, Ochako called out as the little girl got out of Tsuyu's grasp and slowly trotted her feet over to the door. Tearing her head over, she looked up at her mother before calling out to her father. Papa. Her eyes met with Izuku's as the said boy was on the bed, his head still resting on the pillow. He had a blanket over him and he looked less pale than before. He slowly sat himself up and gave a strange smile towards the child. Hi, Papa, Iri shouted with happy tears flowing down her cheeks. Running over to the bed, she jumped onto the side and climbed before she was on the mattress and jumped straight into Izuku's arms, her tiny arms clutching his stomach tightly while the latter wrapped his own arms around her frame. Why, you scared me. I thought you were gonna leave us. Please don't leave, Iri whimpered as her words sent pangs of guilt towards him. Sorry for scaring you, Iri, but I'm not leaving you anytime soon. I promise, Izuku said with a sorrowful look before changing it into a determined expression. Iri just nodded her head up and down in his chest, but she refused to let go of him. Izuku decided to play with her hair, giving her comfort and reassurance that he was still here. Ochako decided to leave the two for now and motioned Tsuyu to come downstairs. Settling down in the kitchen, Tsuyu sat on the chair near the kitchen island while Ochako decided to make some tea. Tsuyu decided to not to speak as Ochako focused on putting the tea together. After putting some water in kettle, she put it on the stove and turned on the afterburner before turning around back to the kitchen island and pressed her elbows onto the counter. Ochako let out a sigh, telling Tsuyu that something bad happened. You okay? I wish I could tell you yes, but that would be lying, she said with a forced chuckle as she tried to make a joke about it. But her friend's blank stare wasn't having any of it. You don't have beat around the bush, you can tell me what happened, Tsuyu said with a straightforward tone. Blunt as always, Hutsu, the famine user joked before starting off with her explanation. Well, it's bad. While you were gone, Deku was having nightmares again. That doesn't sound like it's bad. His entity was trying to possess him, she clarified, earning a moment of silence from the frog girl. Oh, Tsuyu said absently. Yeah, it was that bad. Why, no, how? His ghost hasn't been active since our time in that place, Tsuyu asked with some emotion in her voice, worried for her friend. Was that it? Was he having nightmares about our captivity? That's one of the deductions I have, the brunette replied with a frown. One? Tsuyu asked, her face even though blank was filled with curiosity. Correct. One is that his demon is reminding him of how Izuku was before being captured, quirkless and everything. Weak, useless, outcast, pathetic, the list goes on. Anything negative really. Ochako sighed again, her brow furrowing even further in frustration. What are the others? Another is that he's seeing the faces of those he was forced to kill. And while it wasn't his fault, he's seeing a sick, twisted version of those people in his dreams. Ochako slightly gripped the counter as if she was trying to crush an apple, but then let go as she finished her explanation. And number 3, Tsuyu asked her. Us, she said with a sorrowful look on her face. Tsuyu just silently nodded her head, not needing any clarification. They all knew how selfless Izuku was and how far he would go to protect them, but at the same time it made them worry a lot about him. The teapot let out a high whistle as steam exited through the hole. Ochako turned off the stove before grasping the handle of the teapot and poured the tea into 2 separate cups. Tea, she offered. Thank you. Tsuyu took the tea from her hand and took a small sip, the heat not really bothering her. That's really good. Thanks. Anyway, I noticed something about all of us and our tenants. Besides being the 4 horsemen of apocalypse, we're very, very inexperienced with our new powers. How so? My embodiment, famine, allows me to absorb energy of others through physical contact. I can also feed off their life force by forcing others to hunger for their desires, rather it be love, attention, power, whatever they want. The downside to it is that every time it do so, my own desire gets stronger and harder to fight off, Ochako explained. That would make sense, Tsuyu said as she placed a finger near her mouth. I've noticed the other day you were looking at Izuku with different eyes. You weren't looking at him normally. You were fighting your own desire, weren't you? Yes, my own desires become increasingly strong the more I try to resist it. It's getting tiring, but I'm doing okay so far. That doesn't seem healthy, Ochako. You shouldn't hold yourself back from what you want. Doing so takes a toll on you physically and mentally. The more you do it, the less control over myself I have, I know. Ochako stared at the tea with sad eyes before going back to Tsuyu as the frog spoke. I have to say that I agree with your thoughts on control with our powers, Tsuyu said as she looked out the window where it was still raining. My embodiment is the sickness of health. It's hard to control when you are the creator of all disease. Before I met you guys, I had a hard time being around others because of those dying around me through disease, and it was worse when I was so angry at the time. Sue, Ochako said softly as her friend showed looks of sadness and guilt. It was surprising because the frog rarely showed her emotions at all. I'm afraid to be around other people, because even though you 3 don't get affected, everyone else can. I can easily kill someone and not even notice it, Tsuyu said in a sad tone. Ochako knew what the girl was feeling. The only places she's been to outside of home was the cemetery and abandoned park in Musutafu. Sue, unless you or Katsuki are with me, I can't control my range of ailments. She finished, leaving a silent atmosphere as they stared into the puddles of the tea within their cups, looking at their reflection. It's okay to be scared. Both girls turned their heads toward the voice of Izuku as they saw him entering the kitchen with Eri holding tightly onto his right hand. Deku, Izuku, hey, Ochako, Tsuyu. He greeted them, earning a soft smile from the brunette and a blank stare from the frog girl. He set Eri on top of the counter before setting himself in a chair right beside her, and then lifted her back into his lap. Could you get her some apple slices? Already got some prepared, Ochako said as she opened the fridge next to the stove, reached in and grabbed a plate of red and green colored apple slices. Here you go, sweetie. Thanks, Mama, Eri replied as her eyes sparkled at the sight of the apples. She then grabbed a slice and started munching on it as soon as possible. So what were you girls talking about? We were talking about our quirks and ghosts that we have little experience on, Tsuyu informed him. Our quirks, the ones we had before we were captured, she clarified. He nodded his head in understanding, although he's not sure if he can relate to them, seeing as how his quirk came really, really late. They all had years to practice their quirks, he didn't. Even though we have complete control over our emitter quirks, we still have minimum control over our transformation ones," the brunette said while the green-haired teen gave them an unsure look. "I'm still not entirely sure if our transformation powers are even considered quirks," he said with propping an elbow on the counter, making sure we still have space between them. "Remember, our ghosts told us that they've been inside us the entire time before we discovered our quirks, and they said that we've been chosen to represent them. They just needed something or someone to bring them out. Yeah, and we have the project to thank for that," Achako said with venom in her voice. Luckily, Eri was still drooling over the sensation of her apples, so she tuned everyone out. "And I thought our tenants didn't come to us until after we were experimented on," Suyu added, her stare gone and replaced with her eyes slightly narrowed at the green-haired teen. "I thought so too, but then I started to recall some things that gave me some insight on why have them. Did you guys do anything different when you were younger, or something out of the ordinary happen unexpectedly?" he asked them carefully. Both girls looked at him in confusion, trying to figure what he was asking before their eyes widened in realization. "Now that I think about it," Suyu started off, staring at the ceiling with her fingers still near her mouth. "There was this one time where I unexpectedly got sick. It was a warm day and suddenly I just collapsed in the kitchen without warning. My family took me to the hospital shortly to find out what had happened with me, only to come up with nothing. The doctors said that nothing was wrong with me and that everything was fine. But I always doubted it," she explained. "I have something similar, but nothing that would make me sick. I was at a zoo and there was an exhibit about rabbits." Achako started and then was cut off by Tsuyu. "You were at a zoo when this happened? Hush, you had your turn," she teased, shushing the frog as she just rolled her eyes and drank some more tea. "Anyway, one of the rabbits got loose and ended with me after being chased around the entire zoo. I caught it, and I felt this weird feeling coming to my hands and body. I didn't focus on it and gave the rabbit back to the owners. Hours later, the same rabbit had passed away and they said that he died from starvation. Odd thing about it was that it was a healthy rabbit and that they fed him right before he jumped the gate," Achako said, recalling that day at the zoo. "Was it all the animals or just the rabbit?" Izuku asked. "Just the rabbit. It was the only animal I was able to pet throughout the entire trip," she clarified. "Now what about you, Izuku?" Suyu asked him. "What about me, Tsuyu?" he asked in a confused tone. The frog girl reached her hand out and gave his arm a quick pinch, earning a small yelp. "First of all, I told you to call me Tsu. Second, I'm talking about your weird experiences before countering your death ghost. Oh yeah, when I was little I would." He looked down towards Eri, who looked at him with such curiousness. Turning his head up, he let out a small sigh before speaking. "I would see dead people. You're gonna have to be a little more elaborate on that." Tsuyu pressed. "I mean, I would see who would die the next day or those who have died in the past from accidents," he breathed out slowly. Now that got their attention. "Accidents?" Achako asked slowly, but she figured out the answer. She was hoping it was wrong, but that hope was instantly crushed once Izuku revealed his answer. "People that got caught up in a battle between heroes or villains. Those that were killed during the fight or in the aftermath," he whispered. Achako and Tsuyu both looked at Izuku with shocked eyes. "He would see the lives of those that were going to die the next day through premonitions. Are you saying you were able to see in the future?" Achako asked with disbelief in her voice, but the teen chuckled somberly at her question. "That's putting it lightly. Whether it be a natural disaster, a chaotic fight, robbery, attack, or torture, I would somehow see through the eyes of any person that was about to die and experience their death before waking up," he explained before lowering his gaze, unable to meet their eyes. "Sometimes when I wake up, I wander off to the walk around town just to get my mind off my nightmares, but I would always somehow end up collecting another soul that wasn't part of my nightmare." Achako gasped at this while Tsuyu let out a horrified croak and looked at her friend with wide eyes as she listened to him. He was traumatized real bad. That would explain his nightmares. He would always be waking up in terror and fear, and why he would return home looking sad sometimes. "That explains why your head is so messed up." Catching everyone's attention, they turned around and saw Katsuki leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed and had a scowl on his face. "When did you? I've been here long enough. Thanks for leaving me behind, you stupid frog," he said, glaring at Tsuyu, who just put a finger to the corner of her mouth as if she was thinking. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Ribbit," she answered innocently, earning a tick mark from the ash blonde-haired teen. "Bullshit," Katsuki shouted mentally, knowing that Eri was in the room. So instead he let out a feral growl at the frog user. Turning his attention back to his friend, he noticed the look Achako had in her eyes. "How long?" she started. "What? I don't." The death user was instantly cut off. Izuku, her voice caught them all off guard. Izuku, however, knew that she was serious. She only called him by his first name when they were in private. "How long were you having these nightmares?" she asked him. She had a feeling what his answer would be, but she needed to hear it from him. When was the last time he had a nice dream that didn't involve someone dying? How long has it been since he's been able to sleep peacefully? Did he always have these nightmares from the beginning and never told them? Was he endlessly being tormented before he met her? Since I was 4. That was answer filled their stomachs with dread. He was having these nightmares since he was little. Was it daily? She asked him. He didn't answer as he found the floor suddenly interesting, and that was Ochako needed to confirm his answer. Could you guys give us some space? She asked them slowly as her hair covered her eyes from view. Suyu looked at the brunette with worry while Katsuki simply let out a grunt before grabbing Eri from her spot. All right, kid, let's go. What? No, my apples, Eri whined as the blonde carried her over his shoulder like she was a sack of potatoes. The child then tried to wiggle out of Katsuki's hold, even pounding her little fists on his shoulder. Put me down, Uncle Kaken. Nope, he answered with a smirk, liking that Eri was trying to fight back. Suyu shook her head at the blonde's antics before she let herself out of the chair. Standing up, she grabbed her tea and Eri's plate of apples before leaving the room. She gave her friends one last look and then headed out. The atmosphere was a bit tense as Ochako stared at Izuku with a stern gaze. He couldn't imagine her expression on her face. Well, he could, but he'd rather not see it. Suddenly, the brunette moved and sat down at the chair next to him, his gaze still on the floor. Izuku, she called out to him, her voice still firm. He couldn't find any strength to face her, afraid that she would look at him with disappointment in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me about this? She asked him, slightly hurt that he kept this hidden from her. I didn't want to be a burden to you, or anyone. You all have your own things to worry about, so I didn't ask and tried to deal with it on my own like I used to. I didn't want to impose on you with my problems. It's kind of pathetic, isn't it? Me asking for help when I can't even handle a single nightmare on my own. He explained. Ochako let out a small sound of surprise before her facial expression turned into worry. While she was happy that he thought about them, she didn't like the fact that he was putting himself down or that he didn't ask for her help. Deku, she called softly as she framed his face with her soft hands and forced him to gaze into her own eyes. Her eyes were filled with compassion and love. You don't have to do everything by yourself anymore. You have us now. Katsuki, Eri, Tsuyu, and me. You're not alone anymore. You can tell us what's wrong and we won't judge you for it. I'm sorry. He tried to apologize, but he couldn't as he stuttered, and tears were welling in his eyes. Ochako softly smiled at him before pressing her lips gently against his. Izuku remained frozen as she kissed him directly. She does this every now and then, but he would still freeze up like a block of ice. He was still not used to lip contact. The brunette released her lips from his and gazed at him lovingly before pressing her forehead against his. You don't need to be sorry. Just remember we're here for you. All I ask is that you talk to us if something's bothering you, and if hurts, we'll be right here waiting. Okay, he said, feeling better as if a huge weight was pulled off his chest. So Deku, why did you bring us to this shitty dump? Katsuki asked the green-haired teen. All 5 of them were at Dagaba Beach, the now new junkyard of Musutafu. Izuku and Katsuki were talking to each other while Ochako showed Eri the view of the ocean from above using her quirk. Suyu was scavenging the place, so it was just them, and all the girls were out of earshot, so Katsuki could finally curse. Because Ochako and Suyu were right about our powers. We have minimum control over our apocalyptic powers, and we haven't exactly properly trained our quirks other than using them for house activities. He explained to him. I know that already, you shitty nerd. I want to know exactly why we are here. He asked in an annoyed tone. This place is a pile of shit. It's full of nothing but trash and litter, and it's nothing more than a junkyard. How? I bet someone even took a dump here because it's wasteland full of shit. He complained. This is a beach, Kaken, Izuku said with a blank look on his face, earning a scowl from the blonde. Either way, it's shit. So, tell me why we are here before I start blowing up, he said as a tick mark pulsed on his forehead. The train, of course, Izuku answered. What? And just like that, all Katsuki's anger subsided into a blank expression. We're gonna use this place to train ourselves and our powers, Izuku repeated as if it was an obvious answer. Katsuki looked at him as if he was dumb before knocking on Izuku's skull. Is your head hollow or something? Because that has to be the dumbest shit I've ever heard come out of your mouth. No, I'm serious, he said, his expression filled with determination. We could clean the beach as part of our training routine. Katsuki raised an eyebrow at this. Yeah, I mean there's tons of stuff all around this beach. Trucks, junk, tires, metal, garbage, electronics, old stuff, basically anything heavy. This place is a complete dump after all. You mean a pile of shit? Katsuki reminded him, but Izuku raised his own eyebrow and shook his head negatively. No, I mean a dump, he repeated. It's a pile of shit, Katsuki said a little louder. Both teens glared at each other, Izuku's eyes filled with defiance and Katsuki's eyes filled with challenge. I'm not swearing, you know that, Izuku stated while Katsuki let out a small smirk play on his lips. Oh, you will? One of these days you will, and I will be right here waiting until you do. The explosive user answered as his eyes glowed red, letting out a maniacal laughter, and flames raged in the background, making Izuku sweat drop at the sight. I think he's starting to lose his mind. He thought mentally. Oh, who was he kidding? He was sure if angered enough, Kaken can blow up and go on a rampage, all the while with an evil grin on his face, and cackled with such evil laughter. Izuku then let out an inwardly shudder at the thought of Katsuki being a villain. They were both brought out of their conversation as the girls came back from their sightseeing. Well, you were right, Izuku. This place is a complete wasteland, Tsuyu said as she narrowed her eyes at the trash around them. Still, I give a 3 out of 10. If we were living in the future where all life became non-existent and robots ruled the earth, then this place wouldn't be so bad. She finished bluntly, earning strange looks from all three teenagers. Papa, this place is stinky. Eri whined as she covered her nose with both hands. Izuku let out a nervous chuckle before stopping himself. So Deku, if we're really determined on cleaning this entire beach, then where do we even start? This place is huge and loads of garbage everywhere. It will take months to clean. Ochako asked him. That's where this comes in. Izuku reached into his jacket and pulled out a piece of paper labeled Dagaba Beach Cleanup. Deku, what is that? Katsuki asked. This is our routine of how we are going to clean the beach. Now first I would have to scout the entire beach since I've only researched how it was completely abandoned and dirty it was. Then I would have to make sections of the beach depending on location and what is there. Then once that's settled, we do a jog from around the beach and back. We'll be assigned different sections every day and clean the beach while using our quirks and apocalyptic powers. And with that, the boy started another one of his famous muttering sessions. Honestly, it was like listening to audiobook, only the speed going playing at 1.5x per second. Katsuki eyes twitched. Ochako smiled at this and Tsuyu just blankly stared at his form. Eri looked at him giggling and tugged her mother's arm. Papa's doing it again, she said childishly while the brunette rubbed her hand through the child's hair. Hang on a second. Ochako then walked to Izuku and simply booped him on the nose, bringing him out of his state. Huh, you're doing it again. Oh, sorry, he said, embarrassed that he did his thing again. Suddenly he replaced his embarrassed expression with a determined one. Alright guys, we have a long road ahead of us, but if we do this, we'll have better control over our powers and become better people. It'll be worth it. I'll help too, Eri shouted with determination as she raised her fists in the air. This seems sufficient. I don't mind following this plan. I'll go wherever you go, Deku. I'll get stronger and become a better host for famine. I hate this, he stated bluntly until he released a grin at them. ... But if it means I can finally blow something up, then I'm on board. I'll get stronger and finally beat you, Deku. Ignoring his friend's challenge, Izuku smiled brightly at his friends. Family, determination. Alright, now let's clean ourselves a beach, plus ultra, he shouted as he pumped his fist in the air. Yeah, everyone shouted together as they pumped their fists into the air in excitement. And with that, their 10 months of hell through cleaning Dagaba Beach began. Izuku, Ochako, Tsuyu and Katsuki were standing in front of the UA gate as they wind blew through their hairs. The first step towards becoming heroes in the world. This still feels like a dream. I know, right? It was 1 second we're 4 teens trying to find our place in the world, and the next we're standing in front of UA. Ribbit, I'm still trying to process all of this. TCH. Doesn't feel like a warm welcome now, does it? Katsuki growled as he noticed some of the other kids staring at them, earning them a heated glare. I don't care that we have to come here. What I want to know is why are we still doing this? I honestly don't know, Izuku answered as he thought back to the months of their training. Months 1-3. The first thing that Group Apocalypse started to train with was physical training. Izuku planned everything out for everybody. He literally went all over the beach and named each section depending on the type of junk they had. Refrigeration section, rust section, trash section, tire and pile section, rotten section, literally everything. He even made a small jogging track that goes around the beach for all of them to do first thing in the morning. Each section was also made specifically them to train their quirks and embodiments. Of course, Izuku didn't make one for himself, seeing his connection with death and everything. While they thought he was holding off death to not kill again, he wasn't. In the middle of the night after a hard day of physical training, he would run off and be building something at the beach for them to use later. None of them knew what he was working on, but they didn't pry him about it, although Ochako did threaten to force him to sleep if he ever came home sleep-deprived again. Katsuki and Izuku were pulling 2 rusted trucks together that were tied up either by chains or rope. Go Papa, go Uncle, you can do it. Eri cheered from Ochako's lap as the brunette held her. They both were sitting on the roof of another truck watching the boys from the sideline. Go Deku, I'm gonna beat you. Kaken, as if. I refuse to be beaten by you, Deku. Both teenagers were pulling with their upper body, focusing on the muscles around their torso. Racing to a white line made of tape Eri found, and behind them were large tires. Ochako held up a stopwatch as they both teens were now at 3 minutes with doing their exercise. Their destination from start to finish was about 100 meters. They were about 25 meters away from the goal. A few seconds later, both boys crossed the black line as they dropped to the ground panting. In time, the brunette shouted, Ha ha ha. Harry laughed as Ochako levitated them to the ground before running up to the adult figures. That was amazing. Haha. Beat you. Deku, don't. Think. So. KSCCHAN. You both crossed the line at exactly. Ochako started off, reading the stopwatch before showing to them. 3 minutes and 28.45 seconds. So it's a tie. A tie. Are you kidding me? Remember, Kakin Katsuki grew a tick mark as the brunette called by his pet name. This is training. Not everything is a competition. Winning or losing does not matter. As if. I'm stronger than you all are and I have the best apocalyptic power and quirk to show. And yet you still have very bad temper and bound to get angry as soon as someone shows you up or scolds you. Other than us, you're pretty much hostile to everyone we meet, Izuku said as he stood up from his position while Katsuki yelled at him with white eyes and shark teeth. Shut up. I have to agree with Izuku, Tsuyu said, approaching them, water dripping from her form as she put a finger near her mouth. If we were in school right now, you would never be popular with an attitude like that. Frog face. See. She pointed at him innocently as the latter grabbed his hair in frustration and then went off to a section with old clothes and toilet paper to blow off some steam. Literally. Do you try to antagonize him every time he goes off like that? Ochako asked with an exasperated sigh. Antagonize? I'm only being honest. Tsuyu replied. Yeah, but a little too straightforward. I'm always straightforward. Right. Ochako sighed as a bead of sweat dropped from her forehead. Deku, what was the plan you had in mind for us with this training? You mean nobody read my training routine? I tried to, Deku, but... She stopped as she pulled out the booklet and pointed down to the small words at the front. You wrote them too fast and all the words are mixed together. Tsuyu, did you? Izuku started only to stop as Tsuyu raised her tongue threateningly at him. I mean Tsu, did you read go through booklet too or no? No, Ribbit. Didn't get a chance to. The frog girl replied as both teenagers gave her a confused look. What do you mean? Well, and now a preview for next week's episode of Frogs, Lizards, and Snakes. Croak, croak, croak. SSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS Chomp. The lizard was about to speak until the snake behind suddenly chomped his form and swallowed it whole. Lizardroni ... The best dish SSSS served cold. Suyu looked at the TV blankly before replying as a bead of sweat dropped from her forehead. I don't think that's how the cycle works. I never got to it. She finished while Izuku turned to Katsuki, opening his mouth before closing it and sigh. Not gonna ask Katsuki. I'm pretty sure the explosions behind us tell me all I need to know, he said as another explosion went off, ruffling their hairs and clothes as the said ash blonde came back with a smirk on his face. Ah, that was fun. What I'd miss? Katsuki asked, then noticed the booklet in Ochako's hands and glared at it. Oh, that. Deku, if you have any more of those things. I don't, but can someone tell me why you guys didn't read my booklet? If you wanted to do your own things, you could have just told me. Izuku explained. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. Too much muttering. I could care less. I read it, Papa. Ochako. Tsuyu. Katsuki answered in order as Eri raised her hand in air. Eri, you are the only who cares, Izuku thought as tears went down his face comically before straightening himself out and formed a serious expression. Sigh. Okay. The only reason I made those was for the physical part of training. None of us are exactly fit. We have control of our quirks a bit, but we still lack the physical fitness needed to become strong. What about our embodiments, Ribbit? I still have no idea on what to do with those, Izuku said, scratching the back of his head nervously. I thought you were supposed to be the smart one in the group. Katsuki smirked at him as the latter glared back at him. And you're the hothead with an inflated ego who acts like a bomb ready to explode. What was that, nerd? You want to fight right now? I'll give you one and pound you into the ground. He's not wrong. You do tend to act hostile towards anyone other than us, Tsuyu added, earning Katsuki's glare. Frog face, Katsuki yelled. See, Tsuyu pointed, ignoring the blonde's irritated stare. Anger aside, what else are we doing beside physical training, Izuku? That is weapons. Weapons? I don't need a useless weapon when got all the power right here. The useless weapons are to help us gain better control our apocalyptic powers, Izuku stated while Katsuki scoffed. Yeah, right. Deku, why the weapons? It's like you said, Ochako. We have zero control on our ghosts and there's no telling when they'll try to take over our bodies again, Izuku said as he remembered his problem with death and its words trying to influence him. Also, the weapons are for us to use just in case we can't use our quirks or ghosts altogether. And you think that they'll help us in the future? Katsuki asked skeptically. Well, I'm thinking that if we have a weapon that's more suited for us and our embodiments, then maybe we'll have a less tough time bonding with them than fighting, he said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. I'm all for it, Ochako agreed while Tsuyu croaked in acknowledgement. They all turned their heads to Katsuki, who snorted and looked at Izuku with a scowl. If it slows me down, you're dead, got it? I'm kinda already am. You know what I mean. Months 4-6. The group were still doing the harsh physical training routine as the months went by, but now they were able to do it a little faster. Katsuki still believed everything was a competition and challenged everyone through it all on multiple occasions where they just decided to let him do what he wants. Now was the time for the second part of their training, which was getting in touch with their ghosts. So what's the point of this? It's about maintaining a bond with our tenants. If we could establish even the smallest connection with them, then we might have trouble fighting them. You do realize it's mostly you who needs it, right? Katsuki, Ochako shouted. But it's true. Still, that didn't mean you needed rub salt in the wound. And how am I doing that round face? You, Ochako. Well, I hate to be the bad guy. Katsuki is right, Tsuyu said before whispering into the brunette's ear. Izuku needs it the most, but I doubt that he'll go first willing. The frog girl then told the boys to excuse themselves before leaving the small area. She took the brunette to a tree with some metal beside it. They leaned against the tree and slid down. Ochako let out a sigh in frustration. Sigh, you're not wrong. He'll make sure we're okay with our ghosts. And then probably try to do his alone for our sake. Not wanting to be a burden, I see, Tsuyu proclaimed. He's slowly asking for help, but he still believes he feels like a nuisance or a bother if he asks for help. He thinks we think of him as weak. Ochako clicked her teeth and clenched her right arm as she scowled at the sand. Why is it so hard for him to believe that we're trying to help him? It might just be speculation, but I think Izuku only told us what we wanted to hear, Tsuyu guessed as the brunette raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He didn't show it, but when he explained that he saw the deaths of those in the future, he looked terrified, and he was hesitant to answer you when you asked him how long he had this going on. What should I do? I can't just ask him about it. He's sick and he'll deny it. He'll say he's fine, but we all know he isn't. I think you should ask him about it at a later date, Tsuyu said. Yeah, that does seem to be the best. I wasn't finished. Tsuyu cut her off. I think you should ask him and tell him about your desire. That's not necessary too, Ochako thought with a blank expression on her face. When will you tell him then? You can't hold it off any longer, and it's only a matter of time before you lose hold of yourself. I know, the brunette sighed softly. It's just that his nightmares have been getting worse, and it's causing him to become less open with us. He's also becoming more frantic whenever he wakes up and has gone twice the normal time than usual. I love Deku, I really do, but now isn't the time to pursue a relationship with him. I thought you guys already were, Tsuyu asked as her friend giggled and winked at her. Not yet, Ochako said. Back with the boys. Katsuki was tapping his foot into the ground impatiently as he stared at Izuku, who was sitting down beside her as she yawned loudly. The nerd was hiding something from them, and he knew it. He's been quiet for the past week and trying to avoid them altogether, mostly the girls. He noticed that he had this guilty look in his eyes as if he did something horrible. Whatever it was, it caused him to be less active around them besides training. Gritting his teeth, he stomped over to them and grabbed the green-haired teen's shoulder. Nerd, we need to talk, Katsuki stated as Izuku gave a confused glare. About you and round face. When are you two going to tie the knot? He asked bluntly, making Izuku blush bright red. Kaken. I'm serious, Deku. Kid over there already views you as her parents, and you interact with her more than me or frog face, so what's the hold up? Katsuki asked him firmly. He stuttered. If you say you don't want to be a burden, I will blow you up here and now. The ash blonde threatened him. I love her, but I don't deserve her, Izuku stated as he looked down at the sand, finding it more interesting. That doesn't even sound like a good excuse to be. Katsuki was cut off when Izuku gazed at him with dull eyes. Remember when I told you guys that people I saw that were dead in the middle of the battles, or how I can see in the future? He asked, earning a nod in return. Well, I didn't just see into the future. I could also see in the past. How? Remember how Tsuyu's family died? He said, suddenly catching the hothead off guard. Yeah, she lost them the night she was captured. Where are you going with this? He asked, but the green-haired teen stayed silent while his gaze remained at the sand. Katsuki was about to yell at him to spit it out, but Izuku answered him in a hushed tone. I did it. What? He paused as the teen looked at him with sad eyes. I killed them. I'm responsible for her family's death. What? Katsuki was in shock that Izuku admitted that he was at fault for killing Tsuyu's family. I remembered. I was in this cell and They forcing me to choose. They had this gas and they were gonna release it into a hospital. Or the city. Izuku's breathing was getting heavy as he spoke. His lips were quivering, and his shoulders were trembling as his mind went back to that memory. That horrible memory. Deku, I begged. I didn't want them to. I begged them to kill me, to let them take their place, but seeing my tears, and how desperate I was, they had ultimatum. Katsuki just stayed silent as he listened to his childhood friend. He turned his head over to Eri to see the child fast asleep on a pile of tires with her head cushioned by her little yellow backpack. Glad she was fast asleep, he turned back to Izuku. Izuku, what happened? They said they wouldn't kill them unless I killed someone else, he said slowly. What? They said they would spare the hospital unless I choose a family. A family they were targeting. I didn't know why, but they said I either do that or the hospital. Izuku shivered as he recalled the memory. Izuku, Katsuki said softly, which was rare since he was hothead. He was at a loss of words for what he heard. Izuku was tortured through the worst way possible. He was forced to choose who lives and who dies. And those scientists ... had this sick twisted pleasure of watching him in despair. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to. He started crying. Tears flowed freely down his face as he spoke. And Tsuyu, she shouldn't even be involved in this. She doesn't deserve it. It's my fault. It's all my fault. He finished as his tears started to fall faster than before. Katsuki grabbed his shoulders and glared into his eyes. It's not your fault, he said sternly. But Izuku stuttered, but Katsuki was having none of it. It isn't your fault. Katsuki gritted his teeth as he gazed at Izuku with anger in his eyes. Not at him, but at someone else. You didn't kill them. You didn't torture her parents in front of her. You're not the one who targeted them. You may have loaded the gun, but you didn't pull the trigger. He explained at him. Katsuki was doing the best he can to try and convince him that it wasn't his fault. But he knew otherwise, that until this thing is settled, the nerd will think that it's his fault and his alone. Who knows? He asked slowly. Just you, Izuku whispered as Katsuki gritted his teeth once more but contained his anger. I wanted to tell Tsuyu, but I don't know how. She's still grieving over them and tell round face, he said bluntly as Izuku looked up at him with wide eyes. I don't mean right now, but when you're ready. You can't take too long either. You have to tell Frog Face eventually. Look, if it helps, I'll be there to make sure you don't chicken out. Thanks, but you're right. I have to talk to Tsuyu about this. Better late than never. Not gonna tell round face, the explosive hothead asked with a raised eyebrow. I think she'll figure out my behavior and ask me before I could even tell her about it. But this is something I have to face on my own, Izuku said with a serious expression. Katsuki glared at Izuku for a moment before letting out a sigh. Fine, but you better tell her, because I know that if you don't you will torture yourself over it and become weak. I don't want you as a weakling, Deku, so you better tell her and get stronger, because I will show you I'm the better host, he stated as Izuku's sweat dropped at his reply but nonetheless nodded his head. Thanks, Izuku said nervously. Inwardly he was glad that he talked out his problem with someone. He was thinking about if he really should tell Ochako first, since they tell each other everything and she would feel hurt that he didn't tell her about, but at the same time, he needed sorted out with Tsuyu. Conclusion, he would tell Ochako first and then ask for advice on how to tell Tsuyu. Month 7-10. The group has had an interesting encounter during these last few months. The biggest encounter that had happened to them was that they met two people that time. All Might and Nezu, the symbol of peace and the principle of UA. Yeah, not something you would expect, huh? Also, during that time in those months they've learned how to use weapons that would benefit not only themselves but their alter egos. Izuku wanted to use a dual-bladed scythe that he can break apart and easily use them to attack. Katsuki is using gauntlets with micro-launchers hidden beneath the wrist. Ochako decided to use a collapsible whip, and Tsuyu went with mounted blades on her wrists and toes. How they got their weapons will be a story for another chapter. All Might, also known as Yagi Tashinori, was walking along Dagaba Beach as he was inwardly thinking about his quirk one for all. His time was getting shorter and shorter. There was no telling how long he still has until he leaves the world for good. He needed to find a successor now before it's too late. I better hurry and find a successor now. Not to mention I need to get back to the police station and report that there was no Yagi. Stopped speaking as he realized his surroundings. Looking around, he saw that the beach was completely clean. He's heard rumors of trash mysteriously disappearing day in and day out, but to see the entire beach clean as if the trash never existed was amazing. Unbelievable. They did it. They actually cleaned the entire beach. It looks brand new, Yagi said in amazement. Still, I would like to know who did it. His question was answered when he heard a couple voices not far from where he is currently standing. Walking over and hiding himself near a few palm trees, he gazed at the voice's location and his eyes widened in shock at who he was seeing. No way. Is that who I think it is? He asked himself as he remembered what Naomasa asked him a few years ago. He asked him to update or call him if he found anything related to the Project Apocalypse kids. But he never thought he would find all four teenagers and a little girl standing in one spot all together. Midoriya, Bakugo, Uraraka, Asui. They're all here. And well, but who's the little girl? Yagi said as he stared at them before leaning his head back and went into a thinking pose. Okay, how should I approach this? While he was thinking that, the others were sitting on the sand enjoying the view of the beach. Well, everyone but Katsuki, as he stood there with his hands in his pockets and gazed at the sun with red eyes. It's finally done. After 9 months of pulling tires, tugging trucks, and lifting dryers, we finally did it. Ochako breathed out in contempt. Yeah, picking up all that trash deep beneath was a hassle, but it was worth it if it meant getting stronger. Tsuyu added, placing a finger near her mouth. Doesn't matter, it's the last month of training, and we already cleaned up this entire place, leaving us nothing left to do. Katsuki said, his eyebrow twitching before glaring at Izuku with sharp teeth. Deku, you better give me a good reason to not blow you up this instant. I do. It's about our weapons, Izuku said frantically as he waved his hands back and forth in panic. Our weapons, huh? He asked him as the green-haired teen nodded his head. It's about time. He muttered under his breath and crossed his arms. So what do you have in mind? Ochako asked. Well, I have what would be more comfortable for us, but I'm not sure if it will work. I still don't have the materials to make them yet. I've been going around the city to find them, but it's still not enough, Izuku said as he stared at the sand with a disappointed gaze. Why the materials? We can just create our own weapons. Tsuyu started only to be cut off. Yes, but not the ones we're looking for. The only thing we'll be able to create is the weapons of the Four Horsemen. Our souls are forever bonded with them and they are the originals, so all other attempts at trying to make one are futile. That explains the material shopping. Katsuki huffed. Wait, so where are we going to get the materials? Ochako asked. I believe I can help you that. You know why? Because I am here. Izuku turned his head at the voice that spoke before his eyes widened in shock. It wasn't long before the others followed his gaze, and their eyes widened in shock as well while Eri saw this new person and tilted her head in a confused manner. No way. Is it really? No kidding. All Might. All four shouted at seeing the number one hero, the symbol of peace, All Might, present. That was a crazy day that none of them would ever forget. Meeting the number one hero who got them to come and talk with principal who decided to let them apply for trying out at UA. It was all foreign for them. Still, we should at least give this a shot. I mean, the principal did say go through the trouble of making sure we didn't get taken away by the government. Ochako said with a sheepish smile on her face. TCH, bastards would only use us as lab rats and it would be the damn project all over again. Katsuki scoffed as his palms sparked with tiny explosions until Tsuyu laid a hand on his shoulder calming him down. We're not there anymore. We're here. Also, you get to see your parents after all this time, remember? Tsuyu reminded as he scoffed and turned his head away but silently nodded his head. Is little tadpole gonna be okay with All Might? Tsuyu asked worryingly. It's not that she didn't trust them, but they were worried for Eri's safety since none of them would be around her until after the practical exam. Hi. He took her to the principal since he volunteered to watch over her for us. Ochako answered. Speaking of which, I'm glad he decided to let us take this. Well, it wouldn't be much of a challenge if we got in UA for free. Katsuki scoffed as he looked over to his childhood friend who was quiet for a while. The said teen was silent as they stared at him expecting to say something until they saw him breathe in slowly before releasing a breath he didn't even know he was holding as he looked at his friends, his family, and gave them a huge grin on his face. You guys ready for this? He asked them. The girls nodded their heads while Katsuki smirked as lit his hand in smoke. Okay, let's do this, he said as they all walked inside to take the first step to becoming heroes. The practical exam. After steeling themselves with determination, the group headed towards the auditorium where all the other students have gathered and settled down. Wow, that's a lot of students, Izuku said, fidgeting a bit at the capacity of students within the place. It's been so long since he's been around other people that he didn't have to kill and collect their souls. Even with new powers, he has no social skill whatsoever. Come on, you big baby. Let's sit down here, Ochako teased as she grabbed his arm and pulled him towards her as they sat at the end of a row with 2 chairs empty behind them. I guess we'll take this spot. Ribbit, Tsuyu croaked as she sat behind Ochako and Katsuki behind Izuku. The latter sitting with his arms crossed and propped his feet up on top of the Izuku's chair, snorting as he looked around. TCH, too many damn extras here. The blonde scoffed as he looked at the crowd beside them. So, anyone wanna tell me who's presenting this program? As on cue, his question is answered as the lights hit the stage in front of them. On the platform, they saw a man with a wild blonde haircut with orange shades and a pair of headphones wearing an outfit with black pants, a black jacket with upturned collar with shoulder pads and fingerless gloves. This was the current pro hero Present Mike. Welcome all to my very live show. I am your host Present Mike. Everyone say hey. The pro hero announced loudly into the mic and pointed his fingers towards the crowd. He was met with silence. Ha ha ha. Tough crowd, aren't we? Well, not to worry. It's my job to make you all fill your hearts with passion and have that fire inside stir and grow into amazing fireworks. He shouted as everyone had a bead sweat drop from their foreheads. This man is seriously energetic. Ochako and Tsuyu thought. This man is seriously retarded. Katsuki thought with an annoyed expression. It's Present Mike, one of the pro heroes in UA. I listen to talk shows on the radio all the time and he's actually here. I get the feeling all the teachers are pro heroes. Izuku muttered to himself and would have continued if Katsuki hadn't give him a chop to head. Quiet nerd, the blonde hissed while the latter rubbed his head tenderly and Ochako giggled at their antics while Tsuyu sighed in exasperation. Now listen up, listeners, Mike shouted as he snapped his fingers towards them. It's time, prove yourselves to see if you what have it takes to be in UA in our 10-minute practice run at our Replication City District. Students followed his fingers towards the screen and saw a preview of the city before the slide changed into a different one. To survive in our little area of action, we have tons of fake villains with a select number of points planted on them from 1 to 3. Destroy these fiends for points to rack up a high score, but remember, the higher the points, the more difficult the robot. You can use whatever gear you want to blow them sky high. Just grab what you need, then meet at your designated area after my presentation. Dig. Designated area. Ochako repeated as she looked at her card before looking at Izuku's and saw that he was in District A while she was in D. Different districts, huh? To make sure we don't work together with people we already know. So you clarified as the brunette nodded her head. Right, that would be unfair to everyone else if they had partners helping each other stock up on points, so they divide us into different areas. Izuku muttered out of habit. Works for me. Still, it sucks we're not in the same area, Deku. It's a shame that I can't show up and beat you with the most points at the same time. Katsuki smirked as Ochako's sweat dropped at explosive user while Izuku was still muttering. Only the blonde would think of everything as a competition. All fake villains spread out across all battlefields in each district. Take out as many as you can with your quirks, but no attacking competitors directly now. That's anti-hero stuff right there and against the rules, you see. Excuse me, sir. Everyone turned their attention to a student with a stern expression on his face wearing glasses. On the handout, it states that there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. If this is an error, then this is a shameful to UA Academy. He then pointed all the way to the other side of the stands, directly at Izuku. And you with dark green hair, stop talking to yourself, it's disturbing others. If you think UA a place to goof around, then you should leave immediately, he said firmly. What they didn't know is that Izuku was slowly building up his quirk to as dark started gathering into his right fist. During his training with his embodiment, he learned how to control some of his powers, but the bond between him and death was still static and shaky, so his emotions became a little more hostile, but not towards his family, his victims. Death would also try to influence him through mental connection to get rid of nuisances in this world to make it better, like right now. He was about to raise his right hand until Ochako quickly grasped his hand and whispered comforting words to him while the blonde growled at the student. Screw off, 4 eyes. Katsuki growled at him. If it really was a problem, then why didn't DJ over here say anything about it, or the students beside us, huh? Now, everyone settle down. Examinee 3452 is right, but save the heat for battle after the written exam. Mike shouted as Katsuki stared at him with a shocked expression. The hell? How did he know your number, Ribbit? Suyu asked as she turned to Katsuki for an answer. The hell would I know? He hissed. Thanks, guys, Izuku said. No problem, Ochako said as Suyu nodded her head and Katsuki sat back with his arms crossed. If anyone's gonna mess with you, that's my job, the blonde stated while the death user chuckled nervously at his statement. Good point, young man. Let's just say that the 4th villain is a surprise, a gimmick that goes wild in crowded and tight areas, so I best avoid that sucker if I were you, Mike shouted. I see. Pardon my interruption, the glasses man said before sitting back down. Well, that's all I have to say, little listeners. Now go out there and have a great time suffering. Go beyond plus ultra. This is ridiculous, Izuku said as he stared at the giant city before him from his selected district. All 4 of them were in districts from A to D. He was in District A while Tsuyu was in B, Katsuki in C, and Ochako in D. He kind of wished one of them was in there with him right now, but this was the entrance exam, and as stated earlier, you can't have others to help rack up your points. Only in his case, he needed someone to keep him in check. I hope I don't go berserk over this. So many souls, so many of them to play with. And yet, shut up, Izuku muttered to himself, getting rid of that voice inside his head before focusing back onto the exam. I really need to get this under check. I just hope things don't get worse. You from earlier, and it just got worse. Was I not clear with what I said? If you are only here to goof around, then you might as well leave. This exam for those who want to be heroes, not for jokesters, the glasses kid said as he placed a firm hand on his shoulder, sending a warning gaze at Izuku. So I think it's best if you don't get your hand off me right now, Izuku started before turning to him as creepy grin formed onto his lips, scaring the older teen. There might be an unfortunate accident in the exam. Accident? Are you actually here to become hero? The older teen with a bewildered expression. I am, but it's not like I have chance in the matter. And even if I wanted to, I can't fix past mistakes ... nor bring back those who lost their lives, Izuku said cryptically before walking away to the starting line. As he did, he noticed the wary looks of those around him after what he said. They were scared of him. Might as well be. It's not like he can even make friends if he tried. He couldn't make any before when he was little, so why start now? Katsuki was the only person that met him when he was little, and he met both girls during his captivity, so yeah, not really keen on making friends, especially if they all fear you. Let's do this. Alright listeners, it's time for your entrance exams. Present, Mike shouted, watching them all from the observation tower. And start. Izuku instantly rushed towards the district as everybody looked at the pro hero in confusion. What you kids waiting for? A countdown? In a real battle there is no countdown. Now get those little legs moving and start smashing. Mike laughed and yelled at them as he saw the students start hurtling towards the district. Time left. Izuku was rushing down a street looking left and right for a robot to hit, but there were none in sight, so he quickly stopped and used his ears to listen for any sound in the area. Waiting a few seconds, nothing came in until he heard a bunch of metal clink and saw at least 3 robots beside him to his right. 2 of them were 2-pointers while the one in the middle was a 3-pointer. Target lock. Objective set to kill target. The 3rd pointer shouted robotically. Izuku quickly rushed towards them. Getting behind a 2-pointer, he instantly punched a hole through its chest with brute force before moving to the other 2. He dodged the second 2-pointer's arm that was aimed at him before grabbing it and lifted the hunk metal towards the 3-pointers, colliding against each other to the ground before stomping on their head. Earning a total of 7 points, Izuku quickly dusted off his hands and was about to go to his next destination until another 3-pointer appeared out of nowhere from behind him. The robot went to attack Izuku through his shoulder, but as soon the metal touched his body, the hand turned brown before enveloping the entire robot into a new color. The robot was now turned into rust before its entire body crumbled into dust. Izuku looked at the dust down on the ground before sighing to himself. I'm lucky that I activated my quirk in time. Then again, I probably wouldn't have died or get seriously injured since I'm literally immune to death itself. Yes, death cannot hurt host, nor can host hurt death. We are one, who have taken away many and send them to their own hell, his tenant said mentally before disappearing once again into the deep psyche of his mind. I wonder how the others are doing on their exams. Izuku wondered as he started running towards his next robot to kill. Time left. Die, you piece of shit, Katsuki shouted as he fired explosions from his hands towards another pair of robots that were making their way to him before getting blown to smithereens once again. All around Katsuki were nothing but pieces of destroyed robots that were either burned, blown to bits, or had giant holes in them. The said kid was laughing like a maniac as he destroyed the robots. These robots coming at him like a villain made something inside him tingle, as if he was on battlefield fighting for his life against numerous opponents with their weapons ready, all aiming to kill him. Ha ha ha. Oh, the feelings of excitement and the thrill of survival were truly something oneself should experience. Why can't people feel like this all the time? If they did, they probably have more fun fighting and enjoying the ongoing battle than try to get it over with. Where would the fun be in that? Ha ha ha. Katsuki laughed as he clutched his sides together. While he was doing this, the other examinees that were passing by or were right behind them were really scared at what they were seeing. Oh, who were they kidding? They were scared shitless at the blonde in front of them that took out the robots as if they were dummies and then started laughing like a lunatic. He's absolutely crazy, insane, nuts, psycho. Those were the thoughts of multiple examinees as they continued staring at Katsuki's laughing form before going back to the task at hand, making sure to avoid Katsuki at all costs. Time left. Achako was panting to herself as she held a hand over her chest. She just dealt with a bunch of robots and took them all down pretty easily, but that wasn't the problem. The problem right now was her aura reverting from pink to green back and forth. My chest, it burns, she thought mentally. The tightness in her chest was starting to get more and more heavy before hearing her own tenant speak in a calm tone. Calm down, child. It's only a small burst of your desire trying to break through. I need you to take a deep breath and relax. Famine spoke. Achako took several breaths as the voice spoke to her and was walking through a small alley. Leaning against the wall, she panted again once more before taking her tenant's advice and slowly took a deep breath, inhaling a big lump of air before exhaling it all out through her mouth, her aura disappearing as she did this. Achako quickly scanned her chest before releasing a sigh in relief. Good, it's gone now. Child, your desire is burning your soul brighter than normal and your resistance is weakening. I told you, you must follow your own desire like everyone else. I need to hold it just a little longer. Child, you're starving. Your soul is literally starving for desires, not through others but your own. And you know what you want the most. Famine told the brunette as the latter clicked her teeth in frustration. The thing I want the most is so close to me but is constantly fighting the battle within themselves and is always haunted by those from the past. Achako argued as she walked out of the alley, wiping the sweat off her forehead with her right hand. Even so, I can tell he wants to be with me just as much I want to be with him. But I won't force myself on him. I want to be with him, without trouble, without the need to fight, without the need to suffer. Nothing. I just want to be with him so we can be together along with our daughter, she said sadly as her embodiment frowned at her. I know, child, I know. But sometimes you need those things. They are necessities vital for anyone in order for them to grow into the person they'll become in the near future. It's not just you. Human, demon, God, doesn't matter who. Everyone needs it. Right, Achako voiced, still deep in thought about her desire and how bad it can be if she doesn't satisfy her hunger soon. How about this, child? What is it? If you make it into UA, I will hold off your desire a little more. Achako stopped for a bit, stunned at her tenant's statement. She was offering her host a proposition and they never really did that before. Why you're serious? Yes, but once a certain event comes, that's it. You will have to come forth with your desire, otherwise you will consumed by it. Famine stated. Okay, wait, what about this event? Do not fret, this event is not happening for a while, so you have plenty of time. I will inform you when it is near, understood? Famine warned her with a stern tone. Yes, Ochako nodded, accepting the voice's request. If you could imagine it, Famine gave Ochako a small smile at the girl's personality. Good, now get back out there and get to smashing. Roger that. Time left. Tsuyu was swinging around the district with tongue from one building to the next before landing onto a clear rooftop. Walking over to the edge, she looked over at the replicated city in front of her and saw all the other students taking care of other pointers. I still can't believe that UA have their own city that is used for battlegrounds such as this. Makes me wonder if we might come back if we do pass. Ribbit, she said in thought as she put her finger to the corner of her mouth. The pointers distributed all over in this section of the city were pretty easy to deal with. Looks like all that training paid off, she said as she got into another leap position before jumping upwards and out towards another building, sticking onto its surface like a spider. I wonder how the others are doing with their scores. Tsuyu then got into a thinking position. Let's see, I have a total of about 75 points. But I'm pretty Katsuki or Izuku have a higher count, while Ochako and I could be tied for the same amount of points. Oh well, I guess I'll find out when this exam is over, she said to herself before jumping off the building into another direction. Izuku was rushing towards the center of the city as he took out another pair of robots and searched for the next one, only find out there were no more in the area. I should have a good amount of points to qualify for UA, but I don't know the exact amount I need in order to pass, he muttered as he ran through the city. He was then met with a familiar face when he heard his name being called. Deku. Hearing his name being called, he stopped his run and turned to his right to find Ochako running up to him. Oh, Ochako, what are you doing here? Izuku asked her. That's my line. I thought you were in a different district, Ochako said in a confused tone, but she was nonetheless happy at seeing Izuku. I am, at least I think I am. I just started running down here looking for more robots, he answered her. That's exactly what I'm doing. Hush, Katsuki. Hearing two familiar voices, both Izuku and Ochako turned their heads towards the direction of where they came from and saw Katsuki and Tsuyu descending before landing in front of them. Hello, Tsuyu greeted them. You guys are here too, Ochako called out in confusion once again. The hell's going on here? I thought we couldn't work together with people to rack up points. The blonde thought as the pestilence user beside him answered his question. We can't. So then why the hell are we all here then? Katsuki growled at her as Ochako shrugged her shoulders. Your guess is as good as mine. Ribbit, I just realized something. Tsuyu started as they all gazed at her to listen. Did anyone here encounter the fourth type of the fake villains? No, Izuku answered. Nope, Ochako added. Didn't see shit. Katsuki cursed as the others frowned at him. Can't you go for one day without cursing, Kaken? I do that every day with Unicorn. Unicorn, Ochako and Tsuyu answered. Yuri's nickname. Izuku answered reluctantly as they both nodded before he spoke again. Back to the topic. If none of us encountered the fourth villain, then what does it? Remble. Izuku was cut off as the ground beneath the four of them and all the other students. They all turned to the source of the small rumble and their eyes widened in shock and awe. In front of them was a massive robot with a giant number 0 planted onto his forehead. Well shit, Katsuki cursed with an eyebrow raised in curiosity. That's your reaction to this? Ochako asked him with a tick mark on her forehead at his reaction. Hey, more or less. Doesn't matter, it's only here to distract us. We need to find more robots before the test. Tsuyu paused as the robot released a giant shockwave through the city by stomping its foot hard, causing some of the buildings crumble around them. The group covered their eyes as dust flew into the direction for a few seconds before dying down. Their eyes then widened in horror as they saw numerous examinees around them trapped by some of the rubble around them. Some of them were groaning in pain and were still disoriented from the attack. As they were trying to escape, the 0-pointer continued heading towards them with no intent of stopping. It's still going. Doesn't it notice the students trapped there? Ochako panicked as the robot came closer. I don't think so. Don't these stupid robots have a failsafe or some shit to stop them from injuring the extras? Katsuki asked in a bored tone. It doesn't matter. Something tells me that thing won't stop if we wait it out, Izuku said before turning his attention to them. Ochako, you and Tsuyu. Sorry, you and Tsuyu go and help the other students from the rubble. Kaken, we'll take care of the robot, he ordered as the blonde let out a feral grin. Good enough for me. Let's get going. Please don't go overboard, Izuku muttered to himself as they all split up. So, while Izuku and Katsuki distracted the robot, Ochako and Tsuyu helped the other students out of the surrounding debris. Ochako made all the rocks weightless, lifting them up together while Tsuyu picked up the examinees with her hands or with her tongue. Either way, they were all making sure that everyone was getting to a safe spot. Katsuki shot out explosives at the giant zero-pointer while Izuku was doing his best to lead it away from the others, all the while taking out any other pointers that got in their way. Unfortunately, the robot resumed its course towards the students and then spoke out in loud tone. Mission directive: kill all students. Must obey directive. Suddenly it opened its mouth like a cannon, and all of them could see that a beam of some sorts was forming into its mouth. All the examins were in shock that UA had something like this in their arsenal to prepare students. Only problem is that they didn't. Tsuyu, she called out to her frog friend before shouting to everyone else. Everyone take cover, she shouted as she used all the rubble that the examinees were trapped from earlier to form multiple shields around the students, including setting one up in front of herself and Tsuyu. Back to the boys. Both were staring in shock at the robot in front of them. What the hell? I thought the damn DJ said that this thing was nothing more than a pebble in our damn paths. Katsuki shouted in anger. The latter kept shouting in curses while Izuku just stared at the robot's target, which was the girls and everyone else. He felt a terrible feeling settle into his stomach at the thought of them getting hit with that blast. Just thinking about it made him more scared, but above it all it made him angry. Angry at whoever set up this stupid exam for all of this to go down. He refused to let the girls get hurt. He was not losing anyone else. Before he even knew it, Izuku was already running and jumped off the building high into the air, startling Katsuki as he saw his best friend jumping towards the robot recklessly. "Diku," he shouted. Ochako heard Katsuki's voice calling Izuku, but it didn't sound like anger. She could tell it was out of worry and anxiety. Peering her head from behind her shield, her own eyes widened at seeing Izuku jumping towards the robot in midair. In that heat of moment, Ochako blocked out all other sounds and just focused on the one person she cared about that was heading towards the robot, fearing that he would get injured. "Diku," she shouted in horror. Tsuyu heard both of their voices and peered her head to see the commotion, and like the others, she shouted his name across the city. "Izuku." The said boy was in midair aiming towards the zero-pointer. He knew he didn't have a plan set beforehand, but his body moved on instinct at seeing his family in the line of fire. He knew his quirk could take it down, but with how large the robot was, it would take at least 30 to 45 seconds to bring it down. So, he was going to use his other option. Dark mist surrounding both of his hands and his sclera glowing back, leaving his green eyes. Inside the mist was an object forming itself into a weapon. The zero-pointer was almost done charging and ready to fire as its eyes glowed. As it tilted its head back slightly, everyone on the ground held their breaths as they got ready for the inevitable attack, but at the same time, Izuku's eyes widened for a fracture as he suddenly burst through the air with more speed, and the black mist finished forming and disperse, showing a long black one-sided scythe. The blade was glowing with a dark green color as if it was drained, while a black shroud of darkness surrounded the blade. Izuku was now close to the pointer's body and knew it was time to strike. Gripping the blade with all his strength, he drew back and swung the scythe downwards at the pointer. A slash was heard and Izuku went through the pointer as its body was cleaved in half diagonally. The beam was stopped immediately as the energy from the pointer died before it started falling towards the ground. Katsuki's eyes widened in awe, seeing his friend take out the zero-pointer by himself, as did Ochako's and Tsuyu's. Izuku then landed on the ground in front of them, his form a few feet away from the girls before the robot was then engulfed in waves of darkness in the background. Suddenly the darkness dispersed, and it showed the destroyed metal laying on the ground. Izuku's size suddenly transformed back into mist and vanished. All the examinees' eyes widened in shock at the event that had transpired in front of them. A zero-pointer rampaged through the city, almost killing them, but was immediately stopped by a single boy with green hair, the same boy they gave wary glances. This kid saved them. Izuku turned back to Ochako and Tsuyu as they were still stunned from what just happened. He gave them a small smile, muttering a few words towards them before he suddenly felt the energy leave his body and he collapsed to the ground in exhaustion. Before he could completely fade into unconsciousness, he could the teacher signaling the end of the entrance of exam. But what was more important was someone frantically calling his name in worry, and then his eyes slowly closed as he faded into a blissful sleep. "You dummy, you damned nerd." Ochako and Katsuki yelled in anger as they both glared at Death User, who was chuckling to himself with a sheepish smile. They were all in the infirmary waiting for him to wake up from the entrance exam. The attack that Izuku did to the zero-pointer scared them all, except Eri, who was happily sucking on a lollipop given to her from Recovery Girl. The little girl was settled in Tsuyu's lap playing on her 3DS, waiting for time to pass by. The former was a little confused on Eri's attitude. All of them were. She seemed way too relaxed, seeing as how she's usually the first one besides Ochako to worry about Izuku. Seeing her sitting casually on Tsuyu with no panic expression on her face kind of worried them. They were going to ask her if anything was wrong, but they were all stopped by a groan that came from bedside, meaning Izuku woke up and saw that he was in the infirmary. And the first thing he received when waking up were the sounds of Ochako and Katsuki angered and annoyed voices in his eardrums. Hi guys," he said in a nervous tone. Achako raised her hand to his right ear, grasping it and then pulled it hard. Oh, wow. Hi. You jump towards the robot recklessly. Use your power that we are trying to hide from others with no hesitation. Destroy the robot and then pass out afterwards, worrying us to death. And the only thing you say to us is hi. Achako yelled at the end, her voice rising higher with each word she spoke. Izuku gulped at the fury of the girl, while Katsuki instantly backed off from his spot and stood over by the other two with an irritated expression on his face, not going to scold him any further. Suyu asked her companion as he simply scoffed and turned his head away. Round face has got that pretty much covered, he answered. He wouldn't admit it, but he was also worried for his childhood friend when he did that move back at the exam. What was that move anyway? He looked like the modern version of the Grim Reaper, and he summoned its weapon out of nowhere. Like he was able to gain control over his ghost and was able to manifest his power. Oh, Deku, I swear if you do something that's stupid or reckless again, I will float you to sun 1,000,000 times over until that skull of yours is completely fried. Understood. Achako warned him with a fierce gaze as the latter quickly nodded his head. Good, she said as she released his ear with a satisfied smile on her face. Scary, Izuku muttered to himself, forgetting that Achako was still near him but was glad that she didn't notice. Now Izuku, Achako started in a stern tone as she sat down beside him. The latter knew he was in trouble. Do you want to tell me what the heck was that move you did back at the exam? She asked him. That move of yours was pretty cool to see, Izuku, but at the same time it was concerning. Ribbit, Tsuyu said as she placed a finger near her chin. I thought we agreed that none of us would show our other powers to anyone else. Katsuki sent a glare at his friend and growled at him. Yeah, you stupid nerd. Not only that, but you also look like you and Death were on the same page, he said, sounding irritated. I thought you both were still at odds with each other. Izuku inwardly sighed to himself as he knew that they were right. He was supposed to keep his powers quiet, but he couldn't help it. Seeing all those examiners along with the 3 other hosts in danger, his body just moved on his own like it was on autopilot, as if he couldn't just stand there and watch as the robot came by and killed them. The green-haired let out a dry laugh as he went over the fact about still saving people even when he didn't want to. And here I thought I got it out of my system. He pondered before speaking aloud. I'm sorry. I knew that I was supposed to follow that rule too, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't just stand by and watch those I care about get hurt or worse, he said with a somber tone as he looked down at his hands. I just needed to do something. Anything, just to keep it from happening again. He finished, but they all knew the words that were left ranging in the air. I wasn't gonna let anyone get hurt again. Not when I could do something about it. They all knew what he was feeling and understood why. Suyu understood as she thought back to the nights Izuku would come home looking gloomy and more upset than usual. It would mean that he had killed someone again and had to collect another soul. She would feel sad for him because it was not only his job but because he had to, otherwise someone else would have to die an early death, all because he chose not to kill who's supposed to die on their death day. He literally has no choice. Katsuki inwardly growled at the thought when he heard Izuku talking about not wanting a repeat of what would happen. Not that he blamed him. If anything, he blamed Project Apocalypse for giving him this. He understood because like Izuku he had to shed some blood too, but he gets a thrill out of it because of war. His embodiment needs the bloodshed and violence of humans in order to grow stronger and wants nothing but destruction, similar to his own character in some ways. His childhood friend, however, didn't deserve that. If anything, he deserved to be a hero. He deserves more than any of them in the room, seeing as how he would always help others without hesitation. Fate really is cruel to humanity. Achako understood more than both of them. Like Katsuki, she knew Izuku more than he knows himself. His attitudes, his actions, everything. So, knowing that he was feeling scared made her heart ache. She knew that he would be constantly haunted by those he killed in the past and present, has nightmares every night, and battle his inner demon trying to form a stable bond with death. As far as she knew, he was still a little rocky with his ghost, but they're making some progress. She knew that he was always trying his hardest to keep them safe and himself under control. She could tell that he was full of stress, and that's he burning himself out, and it's only a matter of time before it all takes a toll on him. They were all brought of their deep thoughts when they heard a yawn come from their friend who was trying his hardest to keep his eyes open. They could see that he was still a little exhausted and his shoulders were tense. Achako silently giggled before climbing into the bed with him and move a hand to the back of his head, bringing it down to her lap, causing the latter to stutter. Oh, Achako, he called out to her, but she just shook her head with a soft smile on her lips. Relax, Deku, she said as she started carting her fingers through his messy locks of green hair. The feeling of her fingers rubbing his scalp caused the boy to calm down and let out a sigh of contempt before he found himself burying his face into his stomach. You're just like Yuri, Deku. You're both too pure for this world, you know, she thought as she continued her ministrations to Izuku's hair. Not to be rude or anything, Katsuki interrupted, but I still want to know about that move you used during the exam, nerd. Izuku slowly turned his head from Famine User's stomach as he faced the blonde with a sleepy expression. It was one of the moves I had planned on using when we would get our weapons. So you were practicing your weapon in secret instead of training with all of us? Katsuki accused as Izuku gave a weak glare. No, I didn't think I was able to form that scythe when slashed that pointer in half, he said as he turned his face back into Ochako's stomach. Like I said, my body moved on its own. He muffled, making the brunette giggle, but they all heard his words clearly. Whatever. So our weapons aside, how did you guys think you did on the exam? Tsuyu asked. Katsuki gave a proud huff as he smirked at them. I know I did better than all those extras around in the stadium. I took out so many of those weak faux villains it wasn't even a challenge. Kind of makes me jealous that we faced only one 0-pointer and Izuku got to be the one to take it out. Let's not forget, Ribbit, that you were laughing like a maniac during the whole thing. Tsuyu pointed out as the blonde turned his head to her too quick as if his neck snapped. You heard that, frog face? I'm pretty sure everybody throughout the district heard you. Ochako added slyly as the latter growled at her. The heck, round face, he yelled with a tick mark on his forehead, his expression getting more agitated by the second. Mr. Yagi and Loudman and I heard Uncle Kakin from the tall building, Harry voiced as she paused her game and raised her hand to enter the fray. Katsuki turned to his head to the child, glaring at her only for it turn into a deep scowl as he groaned and released a sigh. Sorry about that, kid. That's okay, Uncle. I found it awesome, she said with a bright smile, causing the latter to let out a small smile. Wow, would you look at that? Katsuki, Bakugo can't get mad at little Iri, the brunette teased, earning the blonde's glare once again. Round face. What? If it's me, Deku or Tsuyu, you get irritated, but when it comes to Iri teasing you, you lose all that heat and accept her fate. That's because she allowed to, he said, pointing his thumb at the child. Right, Izuku muttered, earning a laugh from the brunette and a growl from the blonde. That reminds me, Iri, Tsuyu called out to the child as she paused her game and looked straight up at the frog girl. Yes, Auntie. Why weren't you concerned about Izuku when collapsed at the exam? Oh, Papa did something like this before. Back when he was talking to his friend Bonnie, they would always do something like talking or something flashy and then collapse afterwards. Iri explained the best she could. Bonnie told me not to worry about Papa because he was okay the next day. All of them laughed at Izuku's ghost being called Bonnie instead of Death, while the said spirit inside him was crying hysterically at being called a nickname in front of everybody. The said boy was blushing and remained in the brunette's stomach to keep from being discovered. I guess that answers your question, Katsuki said, still laughing as Tsuyu nodded her head. It does, Tsuyu said before taking her thoughts to the exam. I know I at least scored about well on taking out the robots and saved some other examinees when the situation called for it. Same here, Ochako added. So after this we're supposed to meet up with our parents or the principal of UA, right? That's right. Voices turned their heads to the door and saw a small creature with fur in a suit and tie with brown loafers. He had a scar running down his right eye. What the? Hello, mister. Tsuyu trailed off as she tried to figure out who this small creature was. Allow me to introduce myself, the small creature said as he raised his left paw. My name is Nezu, the one who could be a mouse or a dog or a bear, though the only important thing is, I'm the principal. That left everyone in the room in shock that this tiny dog, bear, mouse or whatever, he was the principal of the school. He's the principal, Ochako and Tsuyu asked. Huh, now that's something you don't see every day. Katsuki shrugged his shoulders as if it was no big deal that an animal was running the school. That's pretty unique, Izuku said as he went into muttering mode in his head about what kind of quirk this small animal had. Ooh, a talking animal, Iri said lastly as the principal bowed his head. Why, thank you. Now then, shall we get on with some important matter to discuss? Principal Nezu said as he took a seat on a free chair. Everyone then remembered simultaneously what Iri said. There was talking animal right in front of them and he was talking like a human being. You can talk, everyone but Iri exclaimed. First I would like to ask you is how are you feeling? Did the exam go well? Meet any new students and make friends? Any trouble happened? Good, yes and no, Tsuyu answered the small animal. If you think anything troubling happened, the only thing that would be is probably because of Katsuki. The heck, frog face, Katsuki groaned as he glared at his companion. Oh yes, I was able to hear your human friend's joyful laugh from the observation room. In fact, I believe the entire city heard it, Nezu added casually, missing the twitching eyebrows of the explosive blonde. The exam was actually worth it because it showed the results of our training from the past 10 months, Ochako said to him with a fierce expression. It actually makes me excited to think that there are so many students with different quirks to battle and bond with, she said to herself as a pink aura surrounded her body. Everyone in the room's sweat dropped at the sight. She's doing it again, Tsuyu said bluntly. Yep, now this is something new to learn. Interesting, Nezu said as Iri laughed in a cheerful tone. Izuku just stared up at Ochako's expression, smiling softly before returning his gaze towards his stomach. He couldn't tell her yet. Not yet. Once he gets these nightmares out of the way, dealt with, and feels less scared for her, then he'll tell her. Ochako was taken out of her demeanor as she noticed everybody staring at her, causing the brunette to chuckle nervously while rubbing the back of her head. Sorry about that. I just love meeting new people. That's good. I actually find it fascinating to meet other humans because while some may act the same, there is always something different about everyone, Nezu says as he pours himself a cup of tea that he randomly summoned out of nowhere. Where the hell did he get that tea from? The 4 supernatural users thought as he closed her game device and let out a small yawn. She leaned her head against Suyu's chest and curled herself inwards as the older girl wrapped her arms around the little bundle. Ribbit, someone's sleepy. Well, Unicorn did get up early to wake us all up for the entrance exam, Katsuki said with a scowl on his face and his arms crossed as he stared at Eri. Yeah, she did. I think it's best to let her sleep since she's been up all last night playing Animal Crossing, Ochako said as she stared at her daughter with a soft smile on her face. She felt movement near her stomach and saw that Izuku was also peering at Eri. That's bad for her. Sleep is very important for someone her age, he said as everybody stared as the other 3 stared at him. What? Not to beat around bush, Izuku, but you basically did the same thing when you were trying to find the right weapons for everyone to use. So, pot calling the kettle black here, Katsuki finished with a smirk on his face while the green-haired to become flustered and started stuttering at the well, that's because, Izuku tried finding the right words to say only to end up with nothing as he turned his head into Ochako's lap and inwardly groaned. The latter patted his head to give him some sort of comfort, but even she couldn't help but laugh at his embarrassed face. No harm, no foul, Deku. So, I see everyone has had a joyful day so far thanks to the exam, Nezu said as everyone nodded their heads. Wonderful. Now I have 2 more things I would like to discuss with you before I send you all on your merry way. The fury animal took a sip from his cup of tea before setting it aside. Where are my matters? Would anything you care for a cup of tea? He offered. No thank you, sir, Katsuki said as he shook his head while everyone else nodded their heads. Ochako patted the sides of Izuku's head, signaling him to get up. He knew that he would have to move, so he lifted his head and sat himself up near the bedpost. Katsuki, yeah, I got her, he said as he lifted Eri off Tsuyu's lap and onto his, resting his hand onto her hair. He slightly stiffened as Eri decided to curl her form into his chest, and his face became slightly flustered. Would you look at that? Even the great Kaken can get easily embarrassed. Who's laughing now? Shut ... Deku ... he whispered with a scowl on his face. HMHM. Human interactions are certainly fascinating to watch, Nezu said laughing as he watched the display in front of him. The first thing I wanted to talk to you all about would be if you all would like to reside here in the dorms at UA. Everyone was confused at his question about the residents in UA. I'm sorry, I believe I started off with the wrong topic. What I wanted to ask you was about the Project Apocalypse. He started off as everyone in the room flinched and their expression became dark at the name. Izuku's eyes were shifting, changing colors as he tried to stay in control of himself. Ochako wasn't faring any better as she clenched the sheets below her so hard that her knuckles were starting to turn white. Suyu just stared emotionlessly at the small animal in front of her, wondering what kind of game he was after. And Katsuki, while he had Eri in one hand resting peacefully, he had his right hand out, smoking and sparking up like fireworks ready to go off. ... But I will not. His answer caught them off guard. I'll let you in on a little secret. I was tortured before coming to UA by humans as well. After a while, I escaped and became a principal here. Now doesn't that sound nice? He said with a casual smile on his face as everyone looked at him with blank expressions as they all tried to wrap around their heads that he was talking about it like it was nothing. Principal Nezu, sir. See, you started off. That's not something to ... talk about so casually, Izuku said. The fact that you do talk about it like that is downright creepy, Katsuki added while Ochako stared at him. Why do I get the feeling he has a sadistic side towards that joyful personality of his? She wondered, forgetting the fact that she has some similarities to him. Now for the next explanation. And he just ignores it like it was nothing to worry about. I won't pry into your lives and what had happened to you during your time being taken. That's all there is to it, he said as he set his tea aside. However, you must tell me anything related to you if you become a danger to the school or worse yourselves. I will do what I must to protect my school. And that includes you as well. Yes, sir, they answered immediately, understanding his words. Good, and now number 2. Your parents, he said as all of them became stiff at the announcement. They don't know that you are here, nor have we informed them about it yet because you asked us not to. You said if you would get into UA or not you would go and meet them, right? He asked as they all nodded their heads. Is that why you are asking about the dorms? Katsuki asked, raising an eyebrow at the fury animal. Yes, while I don't understand why you would want to remain hidden from your family, you are entitled to have reasons why. Do you wish to see them again? Everyone went into deep thought as thinking of their parents. As Ochako thought about her parents, she wasn't even too sure if she should. The real reason she wanted to become a hero was so she could help her parents. They always spent so stuff on her when she needed it, but they always refused to let her help them, saying they were okay. It may sound a bit selfish wanting to be a hero for money, but she only needed it so she could pay her parents back for all the stuff they did for her. One of her real intentions of being a hero and the other was furry. Katsuki thought about the old hag and old man when he heard the term parents. As much as annoying his mother was, he truly did miss her. The heated arguments, which was their normal antic for them, he missed it. Yelling at her and cursing her out while she did the same, he missed it. He would never admit aloud to the others, but he did love his parents and wanted nothing more than to hug them right now. Suyu didn't really have a home to go back to since her family was dead and gone. While she is still somewhat angry and hurt at their deaths, she accepted the fact that they were gone and she had gotten her revenge for them when she escaped. The only problem was where she would go, and that's where Katsuki came in. He offered her into his family with open arms if she didn't have anywhere else to go. If she was honest, she would never thought in a million years that the explosive blonde would welcome her into his family. Maybe because they got close over the years. She always knew that there was a nice guy inside him, even if he does threaten to kill people every time. But that's what made him who he is. Izuku didn't know what to do. If there was anything in life that he was scared of more than anything besides losing his family, it was seeing his mother again. How long has it been since he's seen her in person? How long has it been since he's seen her smile? The important thing on his mind that he was worried about is acceptance. Would his mother still accept him for all killings he has done? What he's turned into? The monster reaper he has now become? Or will she turn away? He didn't know. He didn't want to know, but at the same time he does. He wants to see mother again so bad. She would always take care of him with his nightmares. Always make sure he was safe, and was the first to believe that even when he was quirkless, he could become a hero. I want to see her. I need to see her. He thought to himself it resolve. As he looked upwards, he met his eyes with his other companions and saw that they had the same determination within in their eyes. Yes, I want to see my mother. I want to see my parents again, Katsuki said to the small creature before turning his head over to Tsuyu. Frog face, get ready to meet them. Ribbit, she said as she softly smiled at him. She then peered down at Eri in Katsuki's lap, wondering how her adoptive little sister would feel at meeting new people. So, when are you ready to see your parents? Nezu asked. Now or in UA? Right now. They all answered simultaneously. The small took one final sip of his tea before placing the empty cup down and nodded his head. Very well, I'll contact All Might and Captain Naomasa. Everyone just nodded their heads as they were now facing one of the many obstacles that will cross their paths. It's time for a reunion. This was it. This was the moment they were waiting for. The time for excuses has come and gone, and it was time to face their fears and move forward. Our parents are here. Not only, but we haven't even seen them in almost a decade. I knew we would see them soon, but I didn't think this soon, not to mention we didn't plan on how we would approach them. Nor did we even think about when we just blindly accepted All Might's and Nezu's suggestion. He's doing it again. Katsuki and Ochako as they saw the death user walk in circles around the conference room. Deku, you need to stop pacing around, Ochako said, but was ignored as the boy continued muttering to himself as different expressions played across his face. For God's sake, nerd, take a chill pill and calm the hell down, Katsuki growled, annoyed at seeing his childhood friend go into muttering mode. Being ignored, the blonde was tempted to smack him in the back of the head with an explosion as a growl escaped his throat. It seems like Uraraka beat him to it as she walked to Izuku's line of sight and quickly did something that he did not expect her to do. She raised her hand and smacked Izuku across the face out of his muttering mode before covering his mouth with the same hand, leaning her face into his with their noses barely touching. Izuku, calm down, she said softly as she removed her hand from his mouth. At this rate, you're going to put a hole in the floor. I'm sorry, it's just... Izuku paused for a moment before taking a deep breath. Our parents. We haven't seen them for 4 years, and I feel nothing but anxiety from this. Why the hell would you feel that? Katsuki asked. I'm happy because I get to see my mother again, but at the same time, I'm afraid of what I would be telling her. I mean, I've always been a burden to her when I was quirkless, and then getting kidnapped just made her extremely scared and worried. I mean, what am I supposed to tell her? How am I supposed to tell her that her child is no longer the innocent boy she raised, but now a failed experiment and a killer? He said with a sullen look on his face. This time Katsuki slapped him upside the head in an irritated manner with a growl before glaring at him. Katsuki, Ochako yelled, annoyed at his action, but the blonde spoke before she could say anything else. Listen here, you shitty nerd. You need to stop thinking with your brain and think with your heart. If anything, I know that Auntie will never see you for anything other than her son. She has loved and cared for you since you were born. He growled at him, earning a stunned look from the greenette. Kakin, my parents are the same as well. And as much as I act like an arrogant prick sometimes, I know they love me for anything, but even though we shout and curse, we love each other all the same. He's right, Ochako said, taking a step forward and grasped Izuku's hand softly. Though you are right that they may reject us and our new selves, we need to be ready. We need to think with our hearts and not with our heads. We need to be ready to embrace whatever feelings they have towards us, Achako stated with a steel look on her face. Inwardly, she was feeling scared and nervous just as much as Izuku was. She tell Katsuki was too, although they both know that he would never admit his feelings aloud and would say it differently in his own way. And you won't be alone, we'll be there with you. After all, we're all meeting them at the same time, she reassured until Katsuki shook his head. No, they won't. From what the Bear Mouse principal said, we're all going to be in different rooms when we see them again, he said, earning wide looks from both teenagers. Oh, yeah, oh, he repeated. Silence entered the atmosphere as the teens pondered about the next set of scenarios that would play out in their head. How would their parents react? Would they still love them for them, or would they reject them because of what they are now? Would they be seen as the children they lost so long ago, or monster born into the world? All these questions played into their minds on repeat until the soft click of a doorknob was heard and a door opened into the small lounge. Enter Nezu with two other teachers that they both recognize. The first was a slender and tall man with shoulder-length black hair with half-open black eyes. He was wearing a ragged black outfit consisting of a long-sleeved t-shirt and matching pants tucked into his boots with a scarf around his neck. The man looked like he had dry eyes and needed some sleep. The second teacher was a curvaceous woman with long black hair and blue eyes. She was wearing a dominatrix-like uniform, a black breastless leotard over a white bodysuit, emphasizing her breasts, body, and legs, along with black thigh-high stockings and black knee boots. She had a handcuff on each wrist and a utility belt around her hips. Why do I feel like I've seen them before? Izuku thought to himself before Nezu spoke. Now then, before we get on to our scheduled meetings, let me introduce you three to some teachers. Meet Eraserhead and Midnight. Good evening, Shota said in a bored tone before pulling a juice pouch out of his sleeping bag and started sucking on it, making the three teens sweat drop at his intro. Way to make a first impression, they all thought as the man continued drinking from the juice pouch. Nice to meet you three, Nimari voiced as she introduced herself before eyeing all three of them from head to toe. Izuku instantly felt a shudder go through his body, while Achako eyed her warily and Katsuki simply scowled as his eyebrow twitched. They will be with you while you are talking to your parents, to subdue you just in case something happens, Nezu explained while eyeing Izuku, the latter knowing that it was him he was watching. Subdue. Katsuki quirked an eyebrow in question until Achako answered him. We can worry about that later, but can we please see our parents now? I don't think I can wait patiently anymore, she said as she started rubbing her arm, as the Bear Mouse nodded at her request. Of course, now that everyone is here, let's go reunite you with your families, he said with a chipper tone, raising his right paw in the air. Izuku was in one of the empty lounges that the school had, pacing back and forth in the room waiting for his mother to come here. Eraserhead told him to wait while he went to retrieve his mother, and to be honest, the anxiety was killing him. He was terrified out of his mind. Seeing his mother again made him wonder what would happen and how would she react. What if she didn't love him anymore or doesn't see him as the same boy she lost years ago? No, I can't think like that, he thought as he slapped his cheeks and shook his head. He had to remember what Katsuki told him. His mom loves him wholeheartedly. He's basically her world and wouldn't see him anything but at the same time he also had to ponder on what Achako said. He had to be ready to embrace her feelings of rejection if she doesn't accept him for who he is now. He was brought out of his train of thought when a voice echoed in the room. Izuku. The said boy froze at hearing his name being called, and by a voice he hadn't heard in years. It wasn't Achako, Tsuyu, Katsuki, or Eri calling him, it was her. Izuku, is that you? She called out once more. Izuku started slowly panting as he turned around to meet someone, and his eyes widened in shock at who he was seeing. Right there, standing in front of the door, was the matriarch of the Midoriya family, Inko Midoriya. She was staring at her son with a hand covering her mouth and her eyes watering at the sight of her son. Izuku stared at Inko's form as they were still frozen in time. She still had that slim form from before when he was taken, but he saw the dark circles under her eyes. It looked like she never got any sleep from when he went missing. Looking into her eyes, he could see how much pain she was put through, all because he was taken from her. And he hated to know how much more pain that he would put her through when he tells her what had happened to him. He was staring at her for so long that he never even noticed that she moved slowly towards him, each step heavy than the last, as if she was about to collapse to her knees. Inko couldn't believe it. After many years of searching and endless weight of self-hate and guilt, she had finally found him. She had found her little green pea. Her sweet little Izuku, the son she thought she lost forever, the son she wanted back so much. Slowly she reached out a hand towards his right cheek and let out a shaky breath as her hand made contact. He was real, and he was here in front of her, not an illusion or a hallucination. She then let out a small gasp as her hand felt warmth as Izuku shakily placed his own hand over hers, and his breath also got shaky as his eyes glistened. "Hi, Mom," he said slowly as tears started rolling down his cheeks faster than he could wipe them away. And Ko did nothing more than wrap her around him and pulling him into her chest, letting her chin rest atop of his head. Her own tears went down faster than his as she felt him return the hug and started sobbing into her chest, causing her tears to flow even faster and let out convulsive gasps. His voice. She hasn't heard his voice in so damn long that she felt huge relief and joy inside her when he spoke. He was back with her. "Izuku, my baby." She cried her heart out as she tightened her hold on him, afraid that he would disappear if she let go. Feeling him return the gesture made her heart warm even more, and the life in her eyes returned as they sat there on the floor, and the sadness they had of never seeing each other again left their bodies. "I've missed you. I've missed you so much, Izuku." Inko sobbed, not caring if her voice was any louder than normal or if anybody heard her. The only thing that mattered to her right now was her baby, and she raised hell on earth to anybody that tried to separate him from her. "I've missed you too," Izuku said with a muffled reply as he continued to cry into her arms. Katsuki sat in the room against the wall on the far side of the room. He was afraid to be anywhere near the door when Midnight had returned with his parents. His hands were shaking. No smoke coming off them or sparks popping off like they were about to go off. No, his hands were shaking with fear. He was afraid. He would never admit, but he was afraid like hell with seeing his parents again. In fact, it was one of the few things he was afraid of in life, his parents being at the top of the list. He just wished that they wouldn't see him any differently. "Katsuki," the said blonde flinched at hearing his own name being called as he looked up and saw two people he hadn't seen in years. Mitsuki and Masaru had their eyes full of shock as they saw their son looking at them from the wall. The matriarch made her way over, and when she was near him, she gently went onto her knees and slowly traced her son's figure with her eyes. She could see that he's grown a bit from the last time she saw him. Reaching a hand out towards him, she went for his hair but was caught off guard when he caught her wrist. Thinking that he was going to yell at her, she simply waited for him to speak, but what he did next was completely unexpected from both parents. Katsuki let go of her wrist only to slip his hand into her own before clutching them towards his chest as he let out a shaky breath. Slowly he looked up, and his eyes started to glisten as he tried to wipe them away with his forearm, not wanting to show weakness. "Old hag, Mom, Dad," he said as both parents' hearts clenched at hearing his voice once again with tears starting to form in their eyes. "I guess I let myself get captured too easy, didn't I?" Mitsuki didn't say anything as she brought her son into her arms and buried her head into his shoulder. Masaru joined in wrapping his arms around them both, crying as well. They both shuddered as they felt Katsuki wrapped his arms around them the best he could before he started crying his heart out. They never noticed Midnight leaving the room or seeing the smile that played onto her lips. Achako was already into her parents' arms and crying happy tears as they held her tightly. Her father Hiroshichi and her mother Nanako didn't even waste time in hugging their daughter. As soon as they heard their little girl was alive, they immediately rushed to UA as soon as possible. They even surprised to learn that their daughter was at UA off all things. They wanted to know how she got there and what she was doing, but questions like those could come later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was their daughter in their arms, safe and sound. "Mom, Dad, I missed you so much," Achako sobbed as she buried her face into her mother's shoulder. "Achako, my sweet little child, I'm so glad you're okay." The matriarch sobbed, hugging her daughter tightly. "Home, my little girl is finally home. Nanako, we've finally found her." Hiroshichi sobbed happily as Nanako nodded her head, both reinforcing their hold on Achako as she let out more tears at hearing her parents' voices. While waiting for the others, Tsuyu and Eri were in Nezu's office with the bear mouse sitting on the desk across from them happily drinking his tea. "Would care for some more tea, Miss Isui?" Nezu offered her. "No thank you, but I do appreciate the offer." She kindly refused as she shook her head. "I wonder how everyone's doing with their reunions." A sad smile made its way to her lips. "It must be nice, seeing the ones you love again after such a long time." Nezu remained silent as he set down his cup of tea. He had read over the files of the teens when they arrived in the entrance exam. Her family was cut down in a home invasion while she was taken away to become the experiment and host of Pestilence, one of the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. He could see that she dearly missed her family, but something about the incident feels off. Going over the files, he's read over of how each of them were kidnapped. Izuku was kidnapped in a hospital when he was alone. Katsuki was kidnapped in broad daylight when he wandered off a bit too far from the common area, while Achako and Tsuyu were taken at night in a home invasion. But that's where things got weird. Both girls were kidnapped in the middle of the night, but somehow one lost her family while the others was left unharmed. The reason for this, he is unsure. Could it have been favoritism? A kidnapping gone wrong, perhaps? No, the kidnappers weren't stupid. They knew how and when to take the kids, so why did the Isui family die the night Tsuyu was kidnapped? Why were they the exception? All important questions. and he'll receive those answers from them when the time is right. For now, let's just focus on comforting the frog girl. Visasui, he called out, gaining her attention. I am sorry for loss. While I may not have any family members of my own, I have seen how it can affect those who have lost something precious to them. But you should not let this loss linger in your mind forever. Nezu spoke with a sage tone. Yes, you have lost one family through a horrible event. But in the process you gained another, have you not? Suyu nodded her head at his question. Then that's what you should focus on. The past is not what matters, nor the future, but the present, he said, laying a paw on the frog girl's leg. The here and now is what counts the most and the important part of life. You can linger in the past all you want, but never let it drag you down and affect your life. Instead, learn from it and aim to become strong. Suyu looked at the bear mouse in awe as she thought about his words. He was right. The more she kept bringing up the past, it was going to get the better of her and prevent her from doing what she wanted. She had trained these past 10 months to become stronger, not just for the others, but for herself as well. She doesn't want anyone else to go through what she had too. No child to lose their parents nor witness their brutal killing. You're right. Thank you, Principal Nezu. I'm glad you gave me this pep talk. No need for formalities, Tsuyu. If it's okay with you that I call you by your first name. Hi, Principal, I mean, Nezu-san. Tsuyu stuttered while blushing as the bear mouse smiled. That's better. Now why don't go on ahead and meet up with the others, shall we? He said as he walked over to the door. Tsuyu picked up Eri into her arms as the latter remained silent. The former gently smiled at her before following Nezu to the common rooms where her family was at. In the city, up an alleyway, it was quiet and not at all very dark. In the middle of the dead end, there were a few bodies all around. Some on the ground with their blood pooling all around their corpse, or another set hanging on the wall with cuts all over the figures, blood staining their clothes. In the middle of it all stood a girl with pale, dirty blonde hair styled in two messy buns, wearing a plain seifuku with a kansai collar underneath it, an oversized tan cardigan, and long black socks with brown loafers. Toga Himiko was her name, as she stared at her work with a frown, seeing that there was too much blood and that she lacked control of her habits. Again. And that's another one. I went overboard again, and as usual their blood wasn't as tasty as I thought it would be, nor do they look good in it. She pouted as she left the alleyway with a poor taste in her mouth, heading home. That's the third time this month that she has gone on a killing spree, and none of her victims had tasty blood within them. If anything, it was all plain and bitter. Toga growled as she went into frustration and stabbed a wall near her, planting her knife in it, leaving a small crack in it. Taking the knife out, she let out a huge sigh to calm herself down before continuing to make her way home. Coming to an abandoned apartment, she opened the door and announced herself home. Tademo, she said, taking her loafers off, and walked into the living room before sitting down on the couch. The room and floors were completely stained red with blood from the last people that died here. She would know. After all, she is the one who killed them. She was on one of her crazy blood drives from where she tried to go for at least a month without the need to consume blood. Worst mistake ever. She ended up killing all over Japan, mostly street thugs and criminals, before it escalated to innocent people. Deciding not to think about the past, she decided to lay down on the couch, wanting to take a nap, as she took off her cardigan and used it as a pillow. Sigh, this sucks. There's no good blood out there that can keep me normal for a long time period. The ones I've been cutting open lately are either bitter or plain, and it's making me lose control of myself again. Don't be sad, Himiko. Once I'm in control, everything will be okay. Shut up, Haim. I don't need you talking in my head right now. I just want to go to sleep. Toga voiced coldly at the other half of herself as the voice just let out a laugh. Isn't that cute? Little Himiko talking back to me after years of obeying my every command. Well, it's not like you changed much. Not until after Daddy started hitting you. I am not his slave. I was never his slave. She growled venomously at Haim. No, but you are my slave, Haim pointed out, and Toga could swear that she could see the other girl's evil smile in front of her. After all, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't even be alive right now. Shut up. Leave me alone already. I don't want to hear your damn voice any more than I have to right now, so just shut up and leave me in peace. Toga shouted in anger as the voice in her head just sighed at her behavior. Fine, be that way. I'll just talk to you when you've calmed down and stop acting like a child. So, get some sleep and rest up, because the next time we go out, I'm gonna have some fun. Hey, Haim teased as her voice faded away from Toga's thoughts. Once she was gone, Toga let out a huge sigh of relief and laid her head back on her cardigan. She didn't have to deal with her inner personality right now, until the next time she popped up out of nowhere. She really needs to find some blood that can saturate her hunger long enough before it completely consumes her. But that was a long shot. The only person to give her that kind of blood was her friend, her only friend. The brunette she bumped into and was given help for her mental state, but she hasn't seen her for about 2 years. This person offered Toga her blood to help her keep her sanity, and it worked. It was able to help maintain her sanity and from thinking like a psycho for about 2 months before she reverted to her old self. She never even got to thank her, but she was able to get her name at least. Ochako, I wish I knew where you were at. I want to see you again. And I. Toga stopped at her cheeks became flushed at what she was trying to say. Realizing what was going on, she lightly slapped her cheeks and groaned into her cardigan. Not the time to think about that, Toga. It's time to go to sleep, she muffled before turning her body sideways to stare at the window into the outside world. Toga let out a soft sigh before closing her eyes, letting sleep take her as she thought about the brunette that she had made friends with, and wanted nothing more than to see her again. Nezu opened the door to the common room where everyone was held up. Izuku, Katsuki, and Ochako along with their parents. Seeing all of them together, he knew that this was the opportunity to discuss their agreements on if they want their children in UA. Beside him was Iri and Tsuyu, the former still asleep in the latter's arms. Tsuyu let out a small croak as she made her to sit by Katsuki and his parents. Hi Katsuki. Hey Tsuyu, he replied as he noticed Iri in her arms. Unicorn out like a light again, huh? MMHM. She's been asleep ever since the entrance exam. Ribbit. Tsuyu replied as Mitsuki came over and wrapped an arm around her son with a sly grin on her face. Wow, that's new, Katsuki. What are you going on about, Mom? Katsuki said as he noticed the look on his mother's face. Oh, come on Katsuki. You think I haven't noticed, she started as she pinched his right cheek. Right off the bat, you didn't insult her and called her by her name. Her given name. Oh shit. Katsuki cursed as he knew what his mother was about to. Katsuki, my little hellfire is in love, Mitsuki said as the boy earned a tick mark on his head while Tsuyu began blushing and turned red-white stuttering. You old hag, Katsuki yelled as he and Mitsuki butted heads, both trying to overpower the other as fire ran in the background with Masaru trying to break them up. On the other side, Izuku and Ochako were laughing at their expense. I guess Kaken really missed his mother. While I know he said he fights with his mother a lot. At first I thought it was bad, but now seeing the interaction between them I think it's kinda funny. Ochako laughed as she clutched her sides. Well, that's Mitsuki for you, Inko said with a nervous laugh. Always picking a fight with each other as their normal banter. Though I do wonder, sometimes if they go too far. That's actually pretty interesting to watch, Hiroshichi says in curiosity while Nanako let out a few giggles. It's nice to see you all acquainted with each other as usual. Nezu spoke up, gaining everyone's attention. Now let us discuss the terms and residence of where you five will be staying at and see if you still want to go to UA and become heroes. Izuku stood silent with his mother beside as they arrived at their house. His home. He hasn't been here in so long, it made him feel so out of place. Just being here made him feel like he was a stranger to his own home. Izuku. He turned to his mother, seeing that the worried look on her face. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, Mom. He reassured her before looking at the house once more. It's just that I feel like I'm being welcomed into someone's home. Baby, you don't have to do this, Inko says, knowing that he was putting too pressure on himself to come inside their home. Izuku shook his head negatively. No, I want to do this, he said with a low voice as he walked ahead of her and grabbed the handle of the door. Steeling himself with resolve, he turned the knob and the door clicked as it pushed open and they both walked inside the house. Izuku only took 4 steps in and stopped himself as he looked around the apartment that he used to live in before being taken. Hasn't changed one bit, he muttered with a small smile as he made his way off to the living room. He smiled to himself as he saw that nothing in the house had changed until he saw something that caught his eye. Right next to the TV was a bunch of DVDs and a green yoga mat that was rolled up settled beside it. Curious getting the better of him, he turned to his mother for questions. Hey Mom. Hearing her name, the matriarch turned to her son and saw him pointing to the yoga mat and holding up one of the DVDs. I didn't know you were into yoga. Smiling at him, she simply walked over to him and gently grabbed the DVD out of his hand. I wasn't. It was a hobby that I grew accustomed after a while. A hobby. Inko's smile soon morphed into a frown. It was after you were taken. The only thing I could focus on was finding you. I was real mess back then. I stopped eating, refused to sleep, earning myself many sleepless nights, and went to police asking for any information on you. Even at work, people were worried about me, but I just ignored it all and remained on you, she explained as she sat down on the couch. Mom, I would have continued doing this if Mitsuki hadn't come in and stopped me. Once she saw me, she absolutely ripped into me of what I was doing. Inko continued, chuckling at the memory with a sad smile. I was burning myself out and she refused to let me do otherwise. One day I was so close to burning out that she had to come in and take care of me. It was also the day where we almost had our first fight. Inko was sitting at the dining room table once again, after another empty lead on who might have taken her son. She was littered in her own work, trying to find him that she never noticed how messy the room was. Literally nothing but paper, all over. Inko pretty much looked worse for wear. She had dark circles under her eyes and strands of hair were sticking out from being unbrushed, and her movements were slower than normal. Suddenly there was knocking at the front door, and the banging sounded very harsh. Along with that, a loud voice echoed through the building. INKO, open up. Open the goddamn door right now. Inko inwardly sighed to herself as she knew that it was Mitsuki at her door. For reasons why, she was unsure, but she didn't have time to deal with her. She needed to focus on finding another lead on. Slam. The door slammed open, startling Inko as she quickly stood up and turned around, her eyes meeting with a certain blonde's. Inko. Mitsuki, what are you? She couldn't finish as the blonde came up and grabbed her shoulders before pressing her against the wall. Inko, stop this. Stop what? Inko asked in slight fear, seeing the anger in Mitsuki's eyes. Don't play dumb, you know what I'm talking about. The blonde shouted as she pointed to the papers all over the floor. Mitsuki, I appreciate the concern, but I need to focus finding Izuku. Inko replied as she tried to move, but Mitsuki kept her pressed against the wall. Yeah, sure, I'll let you focus on finding Izuku while your health is being currently ignored. Mitsuki replied with a sarcastic tone as she rolled her eyes. Inko, you need to stop. Are you trying to keep me from finding my son? Inko whispered, but Mitsuki could hear the small threat within her tone. No one is trying to stop you from finding him, Inko, but you're too focused into this that you're ignoring everyone else. Mitsuki explained as she glared at her best friend. You need to take a break, she told her, unknowingly causing a fire in Inko to stir. Take a break. Stop. As in I should give up on finding him? Inko says in a low tone as her hair foreshadowed her eyes and the items around them started to shake. Inko. She reached to touch the Midoriya matriarch only to brace for impact as she received a blast of wind and flew across the room to the wall. Grunting a bit, she rubbed her shoulders as her eyes peered up at Inko and was shocked at what she saw. Instead of the normal kind green eyes, they were replaced with black iris and dark green pupils glowing with cracks appearing underneath them. Again. What? Mitsuki asked, worried about her friend's state of mind. Again, Inko repeated as her hands slowly formed into fists and clenched them hard. Another one has gave up. Giving up on my son as if he didn't matter. Mitsuki looked at her friend in worry. Listening to her words, it sounded like she was more than angry. He's my boy. He's my only baby. And everyone keeps giving up on him, so why? Inko looked up and her eyes glowed even more. Why do you all give up on my son? Inko screamed as her quirk acted out and a wave of energy swept through the apartment and all the objects around the house started floating. Her screams howled as all the glass in the apartment shattered and echoed across the city. No fucking way. Katsuki stared at his mother in shock as he heard the story of what had happened between them. Auntie Inko really did all that? Mitsuki gave him a solemn smile as she nodded her head. Inko wasn't just angry, she was furious. She thought I was like everyone else when I told her to slow down. She thought I was giving up on Izu-chan like everyone else had. Everyone? Katsuki raised an eyebrow. While Detective Naomasa didn't, most of the people around Musutafu have given up on searching for him. They left it as another one of missing person cases and left it as that. Inko was so angry, but she refused to show any emotions when they told her. Mitsuki then picked up a photo frame with a family photo, showing her, Inko, Masaru, Izuku and Katsuki when they were kids. It's like most of her soul died when her son was taken. She just became empty, avoided society, people, everything. The only thing she focused on was her son. Damn, Katsuki breathed as he thought about Inko. He didn't want to imagine it. He couldn't see his aunt Inko other than this sweet and kind woman. Yeah, Mitsuki then frowned as she remembered their fight. Inko did more than just yell. She released all her emotions. Her dam broke and she just broke down. The blonde matriarch breathed a sad sigh, recalling the event that showed Inko's feelings. Inko. Mitsuki screamed as she struggled her way to reach her friend who was filled with anger. She then ducked as a lamp missed her head and hit the wall. Why Mitsuki? Why must I stop now? Why must I stop when my baby is out there scared and alone waiting for someone to rescue him? Inko raged as she threw another item at her friend who was dodging and ducking to avoid getting seriously hurt. Damn it! Mitsuki cursed as she ran her way through and tackled Inko to the ground, straddling her and pinning her arms to side, both struggling for dominance. Get off me! Not until you calm the fuck down! Mitsuki shouted. She hissed when she felt Inko's nails dig into her skin, trying to break free. Get off! Inko, please, you need to stop. You're not helping your son by ignoring your health and ignoring your friends. Let us help you! Mitsuki screamed at her. Inko then kneed her in the gut before turning them over with herself on top of the blonde. Don't you dare tell me how to help my son! Inko screamed as she glared at her best friend. You have no idea what's it like to have the most important person to you taken away from you. What about Hisashi? I know you both are on bad terms, but isn't he his son too? He may be a villain and all, but he's still your husband and Izuku's father. Mitsuki shouted at Inko, unknowingly striking a chord within Inko. Hisashi left us after finding out Izuku was quirkless. Soon after, he became the villain known as Blaze and killed many people and heroes because they were weak. As far as I'm concerned, that bastard is no husband of mine. Inko raged as she glared at Mitsuki. The said blonde was surprised at hearing her best friend cursing. She knew that he was the villain, but she thought that Inko still have some love for him because of her kindness. Clearly that wasn't the case. Izuku is my world, the one person I love more than anything, and I couldn't do anything for him. She screamed, but Mitsuki could swear that there was a crack in her voice. I couldn't give him a quirk. I couldn't keep him from getting hurt. I couldn't keep him from getting taken away. I couldn't do anything. Mitsuki stayed silent as she stared at the mother Midoriya. She was more than angry at the police, at society, the world. She was angry at herself. All the anger, frustration she felt towards everything. It was all directed to herself. She blamed herself for everything that has happened to them. Hasashi leaving, Izuku being bullied, then getting taken and declared missing. She thought it was all because of her. Splash. Mitsuki was brought out of her thoughts when she felt something drop on her cheek. Looking up, she saw Inko crying with a frustrated look on her face. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks as she hiccuped and stared at Mitsuki with hurt eyes. I couldn't protect him. He's my child, Mitsuki. He's the most precious thing that I could ever have, and he was taken from me. I shouldn't have left him alone at the hospital. I should have stayed like a mother should. I should have had the doctor in the room to tell me about my son's injuries. Sobbed. She slowly got off Mitsuki and stared at the ground with arms limp at her side. It's my fault. It's my fault that my son was taken. Inko couldn't say any more as Mitsuki sat up and pulled Inko into her arms, wrapping her arms around her trembling form as she broke down and just wailed. Mitsuki finally understood why Inko was the way she is now. Punishment. She was punishing herself for everything that had happened to her son. Born with no quirk, non-social, getting taken. She blamed herself for it all. She wasn't avoiding her health by focusing on her son. She was doing it on purpose as a way for her to pay for failure, thinking she failed her son, who's done nothing but love and help her in every single way. Inko, she whispered as she held the back of Inko's head and let the woman sob her heart out. I'm sorry, Izuku. Sob. I'm so sorry. Sob. Inko cried as she felt Mitsuki's arms tighten around her frame and felt droplets on her head. The blonde was crying at how broken her friend was and wondering what she could do to help her. Izuku stared at his mother in silence as she told him everything about that had happened while he was taken. His mother was not only in pain, she was in despair. She held all her emotions and kept them to herself, never expressing how she felt about him being gone. She punished herself all because of him. It was his fault. Even though he was only 10, he still hurt his mother. He hurt her more than his father when they left them. If he wasn't so weak, or maybe if he had found the courage to back to his mother, then maybe she wouldn't have to suffer like that. Izuku, I know what you're thinking, and I don't want you to think like that. It's not your fault, Inko stated. But, no, Inko cut him off as she grabbed his hands with her own and gazed into his eyes with utmost care. Izuku, you were only 10 and there was nothing you could do. It's my own fault for becoming distant and for what happened to me, she said as she frowned at him. If Mitsuki hadn't come, I'm pretty sure I would have killed myself trying to find you. Izuku's form went still at the word kill. She would have killed herself trying to find him. He wanted to refuse and not think that she would do that, but his mind could not as he thought back to himself when he killed all those kids back in captivity. He could never sleep at night, and he was slowly killing himself for retribution so those who he had killed with his own 2 hands could rest in peace. If Katsuki and Ochako had not watched him, he didn't even want to think about what would happen to Inko if he died. Mom, he said slowly as he looked up at his mother. Are you okay? He asked slowly. He wanted to know if she really was after everything that happened. Inko released his hands only to caress his cheeks, her fingers tracing over his freckles, and leaned her forehead against his. I am now that you're okay. I missed you so much, Izuku. Inko felt him grasp her hands once more as he rubbed his thumb over her soft hands. I missed you too, Mom. I never thought I would see you again. Izuku, I want to know what had happened to you, she said in a soft tone which confused him. Not now, not when you just came back to me. I want to know everything when you're ready. I know how much you like to not have me worry about you, but please talk to me, she pleaded. She didn't want to find out on her own about what troubles her son had endured. She wanted him to tell her anything that was problem-related. She didn't want to find out on her own again. And if she did have to find out on her own, she was going to talk to him about it. She refused to be left in the dark any longer. Okay, Mom. I promise. I'll talk to you, Izuku vowed, inwardly happy that he was okay to talk with Inko about anything from now on. He would have no trouble talking to her now, although deep down, he hoped he would never have to tell her about death and his real reason for being inside him. Actually, Mom, he started gaining the matriarch's attention once more. There is something that I do need to talk about. Shit, was all Katsuki could say as his mother told him about the breakdown of his aunt. I tell you one of the most interesting stories while you were kidnapped, and that's the first word that comes out of your mouth, Mitsuki teased with a sly smirk on her face. Well, yeah, he admitted as he gazed at the floor. If I was my old self, I probably wouldn't believe it. But after what happened to Izuku, then to me, I guess anything's possible, huh? Katsuki let out a bitter laugh at the end. She turned her head towards her son as he looked at her with a frown. Did the same thing happen to you when I got taken? Sai, I can't lie to you and say I wasn't pissed and extremely angry. I literally wanted to go out and burst through every single damn door in the city to find you. But if I did that, I would be a hypocrite. Hypocrite. Katsuki wondered before his mind went back to Inko. Don't tell me you did the same thing as Auntie Inko. No, while I didn't ignore people, I just lashed out at everything and everyone and blamed myself for losing you. And just like me, Inko did the same thing. But instead of fighting back, she let herself get hurt. She told me to let out all of my anger and she directed it all to her. While I was reluctant to do so, she insisted and said something words to rope me into attacking her. Mitsuki laughed as she remembered her breakdown. I swear that woman is too kind for this world. Katsuki looked at his mother with a slack-jawed expression. Both her and his auntie fought each other, screamed at the world in anger, blamed themselves for what happened to him and Izuku, and then helped comforted each other as they searched for their sons. But that's not what got him. What got him was the fact that Auntie Inko and Mitsuki fought each other and both were laughing at the events like it was a normal thing, which makes him wonder what Deku would think if he was told about it. On second thought, it's better he doesn't. While Izuku may have changed, he still was himself at heart. And Katsuki was pretty sure the damn nerd would faint at hearing their mothers fight and then apologize profusely for what happened between them, even though it wasn't his fault. Sigh, yep, classic Deku. You both are crazy. He let out a soft laugh as Mitsuki then wrapped an arm around his neck and started digging her knuckles into her fist. Says the brat that threatened everyone that tried to hurt his best friend. She teased him, earning a tick mark from her son. Shut up, Katsuki yelled comically with shark teeth and blank eyes while Mitsuki just laughed at him. It wasn't long before Katsuki started laughing with her. Suddenly the feeling of warmth encased his head as he was buried into Mitsuki's chest as she wrapped her arms around him. It's a huge relief to have you back, Katsuki. Katsuki said nothing as he returned the hug and relaxed in his mother's arms. Good to be back, Mom. It was now the start of school as students chatted among themselves, walking in the hallways of UA or hanging out in their little groups. Standing in front of the building was Izuku as he stared at the scene before him. He still couldn't believe that he was here. He was on his way to becoming a hero, like All Might. While deep down he feels like he doesn't deserve to become one, his mother, Eri, and Ochako all wanted him to. Now to officially start his journey, he needs to do one thing, one crucial thing that is the most important part of being a UA student. He had to fix his tie. How the heck do people put this on? Izuku said as took the red tie off his neck and gazed at his hand with twitching eyebrows. Why are you so difficult? Suddenly his tie was taken out of his hands as Ochako stood by him with a smile on her face. It's not difficult if you know how to put it on, Deku. She giggled as she put her arms around his neck and started doing his tie, bringing the cloth to the front and tied the final knot, then straightened it. Thanks, you're welcome. She then grabbed his hand and started dragging him to their classroom. Walking through the campus, some bystanders noticed their joint hands and Izuku slowly blushed at the fact that he was holding Ochako's hand in public. Why the heck am I so shy about this? We hold hands all the time, what makes this any different from before? He asked himself mentally. It was probably that they've been walking the streets in secret, in cloaks or at night hiding from society and never displayed public affection. Yeah, that makes sense, he whispered to himself. While he was still blushing, Ochako remained smiling in joy and contempt. Not only was she enjoying Izuku's company, but both were finally able to have some normality in their life. She thought that she wouldn't be able to enjoy high school life after their captivity, but it seems that miracles do work after all. If they hadn't, then they would have never been able to escape, never see their families again, or even found Eri. Speaking of which, Deku, she called to him, earning his attention. I forgot to ask, where's Eri? She wasn't with you and she wasn't with Tsuyu, so where did she go? She asked frantically as her mother instinct started taking over. Izuku then answered her and reassured her worries. You don't worry, Ochako. Principal Nezu said he would watch over her for a bit while my mom is at work. Speaking of your mother, how did she take the news about us being together and about Eri? Ochako asked. She was extremely happy that I have a girlfriend, Izuku said as he blushed at the word girlfriend. My mom is also off from work today, so she volunteered to watch Eri. Hi, my parents were happy when I told them about you too. As for Eri, I want her to get used to people again. Outside our group, the only people she trusts are our parents, Principal Nezu and All Might. The brunette stated as she and Izuku went up a flight of stairs and turned a corner. So, what do you think? I think you're right. We've never really took Eri out anywhere other than the park and beach, but that was only when it was just us two or all together. Izuku agreed as they approached their classroom door. Welp, here we are. Ochako beamed as they both stared at the giant door with the text 1 in big red painted on. It's so big. It's a big door for people so small. Maybe someone with a gigantification quirk or a mutation quirk. Izuku wondered as the brunette shrugged her shoulders. They both were about to enter when they heard a familiar voice shouting through the door. The voice not only sounded familiar, but they were also threatening whoever they were talking to. And there goes Kaken. Izuku sighed as Ochako giggled. Well, what do you expect? He is a hothead after all. She said like it was a fact about the war host, which it was. Outside of them, Tsuyu and their parents, Katsuki can't to anybody without at least insulting them or blowing a fuse. True, Izuku said as he grasped the door and slid it open, allowing him and Ochako to enter. Looking around, they saw a multitude of students within, all with different features. But their attention was soon turned to Katsuki as they heard the blonde arguing with a familiar student from the entrance exam. Oh no, remove your feet from that desk this once. The student turned out to be the one that Izuku threatened back at the exam. It's disrespectful to the carpenters who have built them and our elders from generations who have learned from there. Why can't life give me a break? He thought mentally before he spoke in the real world. Why can't I catch a break? Izuku frowned as a sweat comically rolled down his head while Ochako patted his back laughing nervously. Katsuki laid back with his hands behind his head as he had a bored expression on his face, opening one eye to look at the student scolding him. You sound weird for an extra. Where are you from? He asked in a bored tone. My name is Tenya Ida, and I attended Salme Academy. Oh great, a fucking elite. Might as well blow you up now and save myself the trouble. Katsuki says holding out his right hand, sparks emitting from his palms. What? Such malice. Are you sure you're here to be a hero? He asked with an aghast tone as the blonde glared at him. Yeah, but at the same time, I just love fighting people and explosions. Katsuki proudly stated as everyone turned their gaze to him. Katsuki, no exploding people. The blonde turned to Tsuyu who was staring at him with a blank gaze. But he could tell that she was annoyed. It's the first day, Ribbit, and the last thing we need is you getting in trouble for blowing someone up. Katsuki scoffed at her tone but listened as he resumed leaning back in his chair. TCH, fine. But the next time he annoys me, I'm killing him. So I don't say I didn't told you so. Tsuyu sighed as the remaining classmates stared at her. The pestilence user then noticed her two friends at the door. Morning Izuku, morning Ochako. Oh, Roundface and Deku are finally here. Katsuki asked. You, the boy with glasses shouted as he walked, more like ran over to them and stopped in front of them, bowing his head. I remember you from the exams. Allow me to introduce myself. I am. No need, I've already heard when I came in. Izuku Midoriya. The Greenette says as Ochako followed up. Ochako Uraraka, nice to meet you. I see, Midoriya. I've misjudged beforehand and like to apologize. You knew the true purpose of the exam, and I was blind to it because of own selfish desire to pass. Ada said as he bowed his head once more. Please accept my humble apology, for you are the true candidate. I know he's complimenting me, but why do I feel like this guy takes everything he says seriously and is one of those who is stern types that keeps everyone else in line to follow the rules? Izuku thought as he stared at the boy in front of him. He was still dumbfounded in the conservation that Ochako moved in and slightly elbowed him in the gut. Don't worry, it's all water under the bridge at this point. If you're here to socialize, you're in the wrong place. Everyone slowly turned to the interruption, only to find a yellow sleeping bag in the form of a caterpillar at the entrance of the door. Peeking out of the small hole, they saw a man's face with dry eyes and bored expression displayed. Izuku, Ochako, Tsuyu and Katsuki knew who he was, and all of them had a bead of sweat drop from their forehead. Is this guy for real? This is the hero course, not some simple public high school Tokyo. He spoke and then slowly took a juice pouch of nowhere and sipped on it. The way he was speaking and acting so far was freaking everyone but the said four out. The caterpillar let out a small sigh and unzipped itself, revealing a tall man with shoulder-length hair. He had a scarf around his neck that looked like a large set of bandages and was carrying a yellow sleeping bag. 8 seconds, that's how long it took you all to quiet down. Unacceptable. Time is precious and you're wasting it. Not even a minute in. And we're off to a bad start, he said as he put his hand into the sleeping bag and took out a blue uniform with white and red outlines. Now everyone head into the lockers, put these on and then meet me in the practice field. You got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Shall I make it 4? Aizawa added as they all left and went to the lockers, all except Izuku, Katsuki, Ochako and Tsuyu as they remained in the classroom. I'm going to go change in the bathrooms, Izuku said as he headed off to the said area. Ochako wondered why he was going there until she realized that if they changed in the lockers then it would show off their scars, the ones they received from long ago. Ochako showed a look of worry on her face before she felt someone place a hand on her shoulder. Looking, she saw Katsuki with a scowl on his face mixed with concern. I got him. The brunette nodded her head as the blonde walked after him. Her and Tsuyu went to the bathrooms to change as well. 5 minutes later, all of them were out on the field. Shouta Aizawa standing on the side as he watched them all lined up next to each other. I'm surprised we're not at the assembly for the first day. Tsuyu spoke as Ochako nodded her head. Maybe there's a reason why to it. I mean, he did say we're off to a bad start. Izuku added his 2 cents in. What if this is a test and we're already failing the first half? Alright then, it's time for a quirk assessment test. This is where you will be tested on how well you handle your quirks, Aizawa announced as he gazed his students. You all remember your middle school fitness tests? He asked them, gaining nods in return. Well, apparently they never allowed you to use your quirks, so we're at a standstill. If I'm going to teach you anything, I need where you all are, so you will be using your quirks freely to complete these tests. Izuku let out a small sound while Katsuki, Ochako, and Tsuyu stared at him in worry. While they were already had a quirk and could use it to keep their inner powers hidden, Izuku didn't. The said Greenette raised his hand with an open palm as he envisioned Death's form igniting within his hand. Angered, he quickly closed his hand into a fist and tightened it. I don't need to rely on you all the time. Even without a quirk, I can still prove myself that I don't need to use you. Bakugo, step forward, Aizawa called out as the blonde walked forward with his hands in his pockets. How far were your meters in a softball throw? Katsuki looked up at the sky and thought. He hadn't been in middle school since he was captured. From what he could remember, they were times that they were in simulations that didn't involve torture and killing. They actually have had lessons on basic subjects. Then there was this one activity that he really hated doing, since it involved killing innocent people. Weapon throwing. About 78 meters. The blonde answered. Aizawa then tossed him a ball that he caught and looked at it strangely with confusion and then back to his teacher. Okay, now trying that ball using your quirk. Give it everything you got and stay inside the circle as you throw, Aizawa said as Katsuki gained a bloodthirsty grin. Oh dear, Ochako voiced as Tsuyu and Izuku nodded their heads while the other students looked at them in confusion. What it is something wrong with your friend? Ada asked as the others shook their heads negatively. No, but we all should duck and cover or hide behind something. She answered him. We've already prepared a shelter, ribbit, though it probably won't last long seeing as it's entirely made out of sand. Tsuyu says as she pointed to the side where there really was a bomb shelter made of sand built and ready to go, until it collapsed like it was nothing. Oh, looks like it crumbled. Izuku chuckled nervously as he rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, that category belongs to Eri. If anyone can build a bomb shelter with just sand, it would be her. Can someone tell us what's going on and stop leaving us in the dark? A boy with yellow hair and a black streak that represented lightning asked. You'll see, the three said in unison while everyone else sweat dropped at their calm response. That doesn't help us, everyone thought, while a female with black hair tied into a ponytail and a boy with heterochronic hair as they stared at the blonde with calculating gazes. With the ball in his right hand, Katsuki wind up and threw the ball as far as he could in the sky, a huge explosion emitting from his pal as he released the ball. Burn in hell, he shouted. Yanai. The class thought in shock and surprise while Aizawa and the other six remained unfazed. Again, with that Kaken, Katsuki, Izuku and Ochako thought in unison. Well, at least he's not shouting die like he did at the exam. Tsuyu thought. All of them watched the ball get launched into the sky, as did Aizawa, who saw that there was something off with the ball as it was launched into the sky. Once it reached the sky, an explosion suddenly emitted from where it was positioned and out came small orange beams of fire that looked like comets coming down towards them, which they were as the comet started hitting the ground around them instead of getting hit head-on, causing debris to emerge from the impact. Seeing this, Ochako had touched some of the debris that was large enough to shield the other students and she pulled them over their head. Aizawa had moved out of the way as a beam hit where he was standing and Izuku had hit another beam in half that was heading towards the teacher as he rushed in and drew his scythe. After the rush shower of the century, the ball had come back down and landed on the ground, making a small crater and was smoking like a burnt marshmallow. Ha ha ha. Now that's what I call a hellstorm. Katsuki laughed as everyone stared at him in disbelief. Is he trying to kill us? Yes, Izuku, Ochako and Tsuyu answered in unison as everyone's sweat dropped at their reply. Bakugo, do not do that again. Aizawa had his eyes glow red while the ash blonde teen just waved it off. Yeah, don't blow anyone up, got it? He said, stuffing his hands in his pockets. That was awesome. We get to use our quirks. This test looks like it's going to be fun. Aizawa was about to reprimand them, but a voice stopped him from doing so. Fun? Turning his head, he saw Izuku with his head down and his eyes foreshadowed. You think this is fun? He said with an empty tone. That's where you're wrong. Quirks are not supposed to be fun. They are the only thing saving you when you can't save yourself. In this world, anything can happen. Life is fair and unfair extras. We supposed to be training to be heroes of the next generation and you call this test fun. This isn't some fantasy where there's fairies and rainbows and all that. This is life, Katsuki added. Reality. They all turned their heads to Ochako, who looked at the sky with an empty look. Ochako followed up not long after. In the real world, you have to be ready for anything that life will throw at you. You have to be ready for natural disasters, villain attacks, saving lives. The brunette's eyes started to grow distant before she turned to Izuku, who found the ground a lot more interesting. You also to be ready for when you can't save lives. Tsuyu spoke, and as one of them was about to protest, she glared at them as her eyes glowed green. You may think that you can save everyone, but the harsh cold fact is you can't. she said with a cold icy tone, causing everyone to flinch at her tone. She then let out a small breath, calming herself down before finishing up. Not everyone can be saved, whether it's friend, family, or an innocent bystander caught in the middle. If believe that you can save everyone just because you believe you can, then get ready for a reality check. Suyu finished as she aimed her gaze at the sky. Aizawa nodded at their words. He first thought this class was going to be like all the others he previously had and was about to expel right then and there, until those 4 students spoke. Their words seemed to affect them as he noticed numerous faces of his students pondering on the words they were told. He let out a silent grunt as he realized that this was one of things they needed to realize if they were going to become heroes. Heroes is not always about being noticed and being popular. It's about saving lives and preparing for the unexpected. Well said. He started earning everyone's attention. Why don't we add a little challenge to these tests? The student that comes in last place at the end of the test will be expelled, he announced, earning looks of shock from all of them except 6 individuals. This should get you more motivated. With your lives on the line, this assessment should be more interesting. Aizawa gave them all a creepy smile, as if it was worming its way in their souls to haunt them. Remember to go beyond, plus ultra. Even with the creepy smile, he can still sound very intimidating and scary. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Each one had a different results. Izuku and Katsuki were tied. The latter used explosions to boost his speed while the former drafted behind him, both finishing at 5.32. Ochako lightened her clothes with her quirk but still finish at 6.32 and Tsuyu not far behind with 6.52. Test 2, grip strength. Katsuki gripped the handheld device before suddenly exploding the device with his quirk. Katsuki laughed maniacally while everyone else sweat dropped at his actions. I got a spare, Aizawa said as he brought out another device and this time decided to use his quirk on Katsuki when he gripped the device again, only to let out a grunt, irritated at the fact that he can't destroy it. Test 3, standing long jump. Ochako made her feet weightless and jumped floating in midair before landing over the sandbox. Izuku went into a running position and jumped over as well while Katsuki used his explosions to blast himself over and Tsuyu used her frog abilities to hop over the sandbox. Test 4, repeated side steps. Katsuki stared at the tiny midget with spheres in his hair with furrowed brows as did Izuku while he was taking notes. Study the quirk as usual. Why do I get the feeling this little midget is a pervert? Because he is, Tsuyu said blankly, earning strange looks from her 3 best friends, while Ochako and Katsuki as Izuku continued studying. And how do you know that? Call it women's intuition. The hell's that supposed to mean, frog face? The blonde asked with a scowl until he heard Izuku sigh loudly. Just let it go, Katsuki. Believe me, it's better to accept it than question it later. Who asked you? The blonde scoffed as the brunette between just sighed at their antics. Test 5, ball throw. Ochako earned the high score as her score was infinity. That sucks, Izuku stated while Katsuki nodded. Then again, her quirk is 0 gravity, so I doubt the ball is coming back anytime soon. They then focused their attention to the sky where the ball was floating. Hey, do you think? No, Katsuki denied, already stopping whatever crazy plan Deku had to test another one of his theories. Test 6, sit-ups. The sit-ups were easy as all 4 of them passed between 6 to 70 sit-ups. Test 7, seated toe touch. Tsuyu had no trouble reaching her legs as she was flexible, before jumping up with a smile on her face. Looking over, she saw the others had a little trouble but nothing they couldn't handle. Test 8, distance run. Katsuki placed first thanks to his explosions, with Ida and Shadow behind as Izuku, Tsuyu and Ochako caught up but couldn't pass them. Damn, I need to improve on my speed, Izuku said, a little disappointed that he couldn't get far enough. I'm sure you're okay, Deku. Just don't go overboard like usual, okay? Ochako reassured him. I'm not carrying his ass home again if he does, Katsuki says walking past them. Tsuyu, if he goes too far, I secrete poison into his body and force him away. Thank you, Ochako beamed as Izuku sweat drop at them. They do know I can hear them, right? All right, everyone proceed to the middle of the field, Aizawa ordered as the students gathered themselves into the center of the area. Here is everyone's results. Aizawa showed them a hologram of everyone's final score. Some of them were relieved and surprised at their scores. 1. Momoge Urazu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Izuku Midoriya. 5. Tenya Ida. 6. Fumikage Takoyami. 7. Ochako Uraraka. 8. Tsuyu Asui. 9. Mizo Shoji. 10. Mashirawa Jiro. 11. Ajiro Kirishima. 12. Mina Ashido. 13. Koji Koda. 14. Rikido Sato. 15. Yuga Aoyama. 16. Hanta Siro. 17. Denki Kaminari. 18. Kyoka Jiru. 19. Toru Hagakure. 20. Minoru Mainta. Izuku spoke first at the results on the screen. Surprised, Katsuki asked him, I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting to be in the top 4, Izuku said, looking at the hologram as he thought differently in his head. I thought I would be worse considering I don't have a quirk like the others. Alright, that's enough for today. Everybody can go home, Aizawa announced, earning looks of confusion from everyone. Wait, what about the expulsion? The boy with spiky red hair asked. Aizawa smiled again, but this time it wasn't one full of intimidation. It was one full of mischief. That was just nothing more than logical ruse to get you children to use your quirks. 3, 2, 1, Nemi. They all shouted while Izuku clutched his ears at the noise. Oi, shut up will you? You're getting annoying. Katsuki yelled at him while Ida proceeded to reprimand the blonde for the insult and how it was unfitting to becoming a hero. No, Ochako reassured, although the brunette did feel chopping the bespectacled boy in the neck to keep him quiet. Suyu just stared at them while the green-haired boy sighed in the background. This will become a normal thing, won't it? Izuku guessed, already knowing the answer to it. The group of 4 were walking to the train station, going home. So, what you guys doing tomorrow? Ochako asked with her hands clasped behind her back. Nothing much, other than catching up with our parents, Izuku answered, as he walked beside her. Anyway, what do you think of the students around us? It's only the first day, Deku. Katsuki interrupted him. The real initiation begins tomorrow, when we get to know them. Not like I want anyway. Katsuki, will it kill you to try and get to know them before calling them extras? Ochako chided him as Tsuyu spoke. I don't think it would really matter. This is Katsuki we're talking about. He's nothing more than a hothead with a short fuse. What was Frog Face? See, Tsuyu pointed, ignoring the blonde who looked close to exploding right then and there until a certain question wrung their ears. Tsuyu, you never told us where you were staying at? Ochako asked her. Well, it's, Tsuyu couldn't speak as her head was down to hide her blushing cheeks. Hey Katsuki, do you? Shut up. He growled at her unintentionally as he turned his head away and stormed off. Izuku looked at them both confused before he noticed something that shocked him. When Katsuki walked away, he noticed that the former had a slight hint of red on his cheeks. Even though that could be confused with anger, Izuku knew that expression. He knows Katsuki better than anyone, and seeing his childhood friend blushing alongside with Tsuyu made him realize something that caused him to remain frozen in place. Izuku, do you? Ochako stopped as he saw Izuku gazing back and forth between Tsuyu and Katsuki. Suddenly he whispered into Ochako's ear, which confused the latter until she processed the words fully and her eyes widened in shock. The brunette let out a gasp as she cupped her hands together and looked back at Izuku, wanting to confirm her question once more. Are they? I think they are. Izuku finished for her as they both stared at the retreating forms of Tsuyu and Katsuki were not only together, but they realized that both teens were slowly starting to fall for one another.